Hello. Thought I had more time. The video I wanted to watch is up. So, I gotta... I was leaving leftovers. Actually, here, I can probably do this.
Movement building, and
it's
there's something I stress quite a bit.
It's hard to tell how much of it was.
Where'd it go?
Anyway, regardless.
Pausey pause. Okay. You come over here. Where is this? Just takes forever. Is that it? Or do I need the other one? I think it's this one. Okay, let's do that. We're gonna click this.
I was actually invigorated by the conversation in that, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about. And so I've been thinking about our conversation a lot, and I've been educating myself a lot, and I want to continue the conversation today, but I don't want to have a debate. I want to have I want to go on a fact-finding journey for myself about how socialism is addressing certain issues versus social democracy.
Okay.
And to understand from you, a socialist,
There we go.
what really that is, and how would it be, enacted?
Big
Dan, are you a
dramas.
socialist, would you say?
I'd broadly I'd say so, sure.
Dude, we're about to
You're-
get executed after this. Ethan's called.
Dude, everybody was riding
This
for you guys.
This
I
is
don't-
Ethan's McCarthy trials. It's like, would you say you're a card-carrying communist? Okay, very good.
No, being a socialist is cool, apparently, online.
No, dude, it's
It's
like
sick.
there
No,
are
he's right.
for
What?
as
It's super cool.
It is
for as
dope.
many
It's
for
cool.
as many
It's
like
dope. It
very
is cool.
well, of course, there's a
'Cause
lot of
you're
there's
for
a
the
lot of people
people,
here.
bro.
There's a lot of people here that would be like there are very few places online where you can just be like out and about and openly defend any kind of economic organization, society beyond capitalism without a tremendous amount of scrutiny.
Well, I
because
got
we do exist
roasted
under a
in our
capitalist
community.
dogma.
Should
Well,
have a
of
lot
course,
of
the other
scrutiny.
side
Kinda
was defending
control,
you.
like,
That's
the
why you
quality
didn't
of
notice
people's
it.
lives.
You know
See,
what I
that's
mean?
not good though. I don't want Tim Pool defending me
Feels
or
kinda
whatever.
brain dead.
Whoever. I didn't watch all. I didn't watch all the.
No, I don't think Tim Pool did anything.
Absolutely.
But one of his commanders, the guy who's like always the really weird like failed musician guy.
Where do I have
That I
to
think
go?
describes all of them.
Let's go back to the
Yeah.
entrance.
That's
But-
true.
But I want to better represent my position because I don't really know a lot, and I feel like I've done a lot of research in the week following.
The conversation.
So
What did you do? What did you read? What kind of research did you
I
do?
had a very in-depth conversation with ChatGPT.
Respect. Okay. That's good.
I asked it really kind of.
Well, Ben Shapiro thinks it's socialist, like ChatGPT socialist. So
Right.
like ChatGPT probably
ChatGPT
Lenin.
is so
Right,
real.
yeah.
yeah.
ChatGPT keeps it so real. You don't even
Yeah,
know.
ChatGPT Lenin pilled you.
So
No.
is Lenin a socialist or a social democrat?
No, that's Lenin is the revolutionary figure that is probably more important than Marx even.
What's
in-
his deal? He's just a socialist.
Yes, he's
All right.
the first. Like, I mean, this is
The
we're,
first.
the father of the USSR.
That was a nice legacy to have.
Could have been.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Could
I
have been.
shouldn't.
No,
I'm not
no,
gonna
no,
start
no, no, no.
already.
You're no. There's nothing. I don't think it's that controversial to say that. Like,
Yeah, I mean USSR, or well, Joseph Stalin was basically. Whatever. That's not what I want to get into right
was
now.
like-
Stalin
Hitler.
definitely had a lot of issues. I will admit.
First, I want to say that I promote my shit all the time on the show, so now I want to give Hassan a
We
shout out.
can't. There's no reason to promote it. It's already all sold out.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Good for you.
New ideology drop immediately sold out. Kind of annoying that it sold out so quick, but I'm sorry. Except for the hoodie that I'm wearing currently. That's it.
Which one is that?
It's the
This one?
Haas anger management one. Yeah.
Get the president on the phone, quick.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to hear it.
Buy,
buy,
sell.
buy.
Buy,
Yeah.
sell.
No, literally, yeah, that's the vibes.
Buy
That's
it
the vibes.
now.
Yeah.
Nice. Good for you. Scum, capitalist scum.
I fucking love it, dude. I fucking
I'm just
love
kidding.
it.
I know you work with unionized people for that.
Hmm.
Of course, teddyfresh.com is that sale going on. Support my exploited workers today.
Still?
It's ongoing. Most of it is gone, but it's worth a browse. All right, so I don't want to do all this new shit. I want to get straight into it. Oh, I have a separate doc. Okay, that's
Damn.
That's why I didn't see it. Hold on.
This man has his own doc, dude.
Oh,
Well, no,
shit.
because I put
You got some notes. That's fair. That's
what
fair.
email is this? I say let the conversation begin. All right, let me just share.
While you're looking for that, though,
When
can I
it
just
has a chat CCP.
chat CCP?
good.
That's
Yeah.
good.
That's really good.
That's funny. I love that.
I'll just announce some breaking news I saw right before we went live. But Rupert, our boy
He died.
Rupert, did not die.
Yeah, he died.
he didn't die.
Oh.
You can only hope.
But
dude.
he has stepped down. The Rupert Murdoch era is officially over.
I've
Womp
seen
womp.
enough secession to know that he's going to come back. That's not
Actually, not a bad assessment.
he's not going to lose.
Yeah, Lackland is the fail son. He's not
sure.
gonna be able to fucking pull through.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Where's my document?
Dude, first he got cucked by Tucker Carlson, and then like had to divorce his fiance that he was gonna get married to, and now he's like leaving his empire behind. What's happening to Rupert,
Happening to
man?
Rupe.
Ruby, you've lost your touch, brother.
guy I
Rupee.
had sex with who smoked crack with me.
That's what he wants to do in his retirement.
Yeah.
He wants to go out with style. Okay, here it is. I found it.
That would be so much better than whatever the fuck he did up until this very
Alright.
moment.
Smoke crack and die.
Just like go out and style. You don't even need to die. Just like have gay sex, do crack.
Why not?
You know.
I would do hair in my retirement. I wouldn't mind doing heroin
Really?
just to ease out. Just be, just
Gay.
fucking. Cause like, who cares if you get all strung out? And it's like, who gives a fuck?
You're like you're making an argument.
You're
for,
making the best of your time.
You're making an argument for palliative care, which I feel like
What is that?
it's like end of life, like death care, basically.
Is that hospice care? They do that.
No, I feel like there's this assessment from economists that there's going to be a major, and it's already started, a major boom in the geriatric care and palliative care.
All the boomers are dying.
Because like the last, like what you would consider middle class of America is all in the boomer side. I mean boomer like in a boomer zoomer terminology. I mean like anyone over the age of fucking 50.
Like actual baby boomers.
They're not actually. Some of them are baby boomers, but they are all the people that are like desperately holding on to like whatever assets they have remaining.
Yeah.
So now they have money, and they're the only people that have money. So you have to
Right.
figure out how to like
Get it
meet
from
their
them.
needs
How do we get it from them?
by insanely expensive.
We should make a
care and
hospice
shit
care.
like that.
We should get their money, bro.
Oh, we
Yeah.
should jack up the price of
Let's
hospice
get
care
their
to kinda
fucking money.
extract
Yeah.
all that money.
Yo, that's my money. Give it to me, bro.
Yeah.
Here, take this fentanyl and shut the fuck up.
Yeah, I feel like
kinda
that would be pretty fire though. Like what you're saying.
No, but seriously, what's the drawback to just going full heroin? Because listen, there's a reason people get addicted to it because it is good. It's fun.
Well, wouldn't you argue that morphine might be better?
But like,
Heroin?
there's massive consequences.
Yeah, I mean,
it's the same drug.
right, in a way.
It's just
that
a matter
already
of
happens
intensity.
with morphine
but
trips.
there's no drawback because obviously you don't want to be an addict during the middle of your life. There's so much you need to do, and being a heroin addict is just not compatible with living a normal life. But if you're in a retirement home, then
I
you
feel
know,
like it's also more ethical than the
Let's
way
get
that they
it.
currently operate those places because it's like full of fucking theft and like
our boy
assault.
David PNP is making a cleaning, dude, suing all these elderly homes. Anyway, let's move on. Let's
There's
get
a lot of
on.
awful
We
shit
have a lot to
happening there.
discuss, but we should get into that.
But like run an elderly care
Yeah,
facility.
and then all the fans can send their parents,
yeah.
and we'll kick it back to them. We'll give
And
them
we'll
half.
just fucking give them heroin. And then, yeah, the goal is we take
Kill that
half of
fat.
the inheritance. We take half of the inheritance, and then the other half goes to the children.
It goes back to them because
Yeah.
they weren't going to get that money.
And that way, it doesn't even get hit by the estate tax because we already fucking taxed them.
Found it.
Boom.
Genius shit. All right, first I want to make this
People say
clear.
capitalism is not innovative, but we just innovated under capitalism.
I agree.
So fucking true. That's the entrepreneurial spirit.
I
right there.
agree.
Yeah, this is some
Demonstrate.
dude. By the way, Gary Vee is gonna do this.
You might already.
Yo, I've got a great idea. Let's make
What?
NFT critters out of your dead grandparents, you guys.
Bro, you know, yeah, I saw like a statistic. I don't know how fucking true it is, but like, I mean, it feels very real. 95% of the NFT marketplace is now $0.
Yeah.
Like, it's collapsed
Of
entirely.
course it is.
So crazy how none of those people, none of those fucking charlatans that were advocating for this shit and trying to get you to hold the goddamn bag have been punished for it, including Gary Vaynerchuk, as a matter of fact. So
He's
many.
been real quiet on the V Friends front.
Perspectives.
Dude, it's like it should be studied how fast the media jumped on that train and was like, or at least alternative media outlets
Have you considered this, though?
jumped on it and were like pushing for it.
Have you considered this?
Fortune favors the brave. Don't show that to me. I'm gonna buy crypto right now, dude.
Have you considered that Matt Damon thinks fortune favors the brave, aka the dumb?
Matt Damon, son
AKA the
of
bro.
a like activist teacher, actually legitimately like a pretty, like back in the day at least, like old die-in-the-wool lefty, fucking shilling cryptocurrency. You can't, you know.
Fortune favors the brave, my friend. All right, so one thing I want to make clear before we engulf on this conversation is that me and you pretty much have like 95% crossover in terms of like our goal for the welfare of the people of our utopian society.
Yeah.
I mean, my guiding hope in social democracy is that you can take the both of best worlds, socialism and capitalism, and create a world where the poorest are cared for, where people can get free education, where people can get free housing, or not free but guaranteed housing, where they get a guaranteed education, higher education, and all this stuff. Okay? So let's talk about this. Now, my first question is this. Given that, you know, in a social democracy, we can regulate things like taxes, housing, higher education, sharing jobs, and all this kind of stuff, what are the problems in social democracy that we need socialism to address? What is it socialism does that social democracy doesn't do?
So, social democracy is still capitalist, with you know, serious, severe market regulations, right? Some forms of viable social democracies you can point to right now is places like Norway, an example I use regularly. The issue is twofold. One, social democracies don't address some of the domestic problems because when there's still capital accumulation,
So which domestic problems?
domestic problems such as labor issues, homelessness, like there's no way to fully eradicate that because the inherent class contradiction between the owner class and the labor class
I
still
feel like that's
exists.
an assumption. I don't know that that's true. That there's just going to
Come
be,
on.
there's not going to be homelessness in
Well-
socialism, but there will in social democracy.
Well, the idea is that completely abolishing the profit motive in certain commodities like housing, for example, will address that problem because then you're making housing specifically for need rather than so you can make money off of existing units.
Right, but right, there'd be government housing, like for example, like
Yeah.
I think that exists in Sweden,
Yeah.
where if
no,
you're
plenty of
homeless,
Talking about
What?
capitalism.
Yeah, it exists everywhere.
So that's what I'm saying. There's not a profit motive. There's a humanitarian effort to house the people that need homes. and
Sorry, he was eating a napkin.
you know, so I don't know what you mean that there's homelessness won't exist in socialism, but
Oh, your tissue.
oh, nasty.
Oh yeah, she's eating all your tissues. Sorry.
That's gross.
Girl,
Yeah,
shame on you.
yeah. She being a nasty girl today.
Better used to do that. I was,
She being a real freak. Sorry. What
like,
were you
what's
saying?
the homelessness in Sweden? That just as a, I mean,
Oh,
gotta
before
be
we look
really
at those
low.
numbers, something to consider, something to remember always is that
Okay, so-
homelessness is tracked very differently in different countries.
okay.
So like those numbers will always be those numbers
you
can
can't
be
actually prove your point.
very different. Like you could think like,
Your
oh,
claim
it's
is
so
just
much worse.
made on
Like
air.
rape statistics in Sweden. If you look at that, I think
Let's
Love
say-
can attest to this
Got it.
too. You'd
Yeah.
be like, whoa, what the fuck? It's crazy out there. People are raping like crazy, and it's because they have a different methodology for tracking rape. Like each individual act of sexual assault is tracked as like is written up as like one
So
individual.
then the
act.
actual number then isn't that important. But we acknowledge that in a social democracy that's run ideally, the homeless and whoever else needs a home for whatever reason would be provided one. So I don't understand what socialism does better in that case.
At the end of the day, these countries, the social democracies that we were talking about, still have a lot of wealthy individuals, a lot of people who are making money off of finance capital and capitalism in general, and their interests are always going to be to further erode the welfare state as best as they possibly can in an effort to claw back all of those areas that they could
So
still technically
you're
privatize.
putting that on them, but that's not. If you have a strong social democracy, that wouldn't be possible.
Well-
my question to you would be, if everybody's provided for in the society adequately
Mm-hmm.
and fairly,
Mm-hmm.
then what? Why do you care how much money somebody has?
Because, well, first of all, I don't, but the real reason is not necessarily money, but more so how people make their money. And how people make their money being through capital accumulation is always going to work to erode this nation, the social democratic state that you're mentioning. And the example I will use is Europe. Because, like, if you look at European social democratic reforms throughout history, things that a lot of people take for granted, even the NHS in the UK, for example, is not immediately privatized, obviously, but it is crippled under conservative administrations deliberately, specifically so that they can inevitably privatize certain aspects of it. It's kind of like how the same neoliberal reforms under the Reagan era wanted to openly starve the beast, the American government, which is why Americans no longer have any sort of confidence in the government to do any kind of social amenities, any kind of offerings, right? Like, you understand, you and I, we both are in the highest tax bracket. We live in Los Angeles, California. We pay a fuck ton of taxes. We pay like European taxes, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, we both recognize that those taxes don't necessarily go to the places that we would love for them to be spent on.
Definitely.
Roads, schools, libraries.
But what's that have to do with social democracy? That, like, my utopian social democracy.
Well-
because all that money in this, situation, it does go to those places.
Because America is still a capitalist nation, just like all of these other countries are.
Yeah.
And in a capitalist nation, you are always going to have the influence of capital.
Well, let me ask you this then.
Okay.
In a socialist nation, on the other flip of the coin, wouldn't you also have a similar movement of people, a party of people wanting to move towards capitalism?
There will always be, yes, people
So what's
who
the
are
difference?
counter-revolutionary.
Well, not just that. I mean, there's a move because capitalism, social democracy. There's a certain level of individualism that you don't have with socialism, perhaps I would say. And so I would ask you, what's the difference? You're saying that social democracy nations the rich people are always gonna be trying to erode the system. That's an assumption, by the way.
Well, it's not an assumption necessarily as
Well, it's just not. It's
as
just
is
not
descriptive in comparison to like. I mean, it's descriptive if you look at how it has played itself out in Europe, where we.
And you're right. I agree. That's what they'll be doing. So I'm not even gonna argue.
Even America had a lot of social democratic principles in the New Deal.
I'm not even gonna argue that. But I do think that in a socialist country, like I said, there's going to be a sizable amount of people moving towards capitalism. So what's the difference?
I don't know if it'll be as sizable, and there
Not
also
only do
always
you-
has to be.
Will you probably have a sizable amount of people who are trying to push towards capitalism just because it's a system that has worked historically, at least better than any other economic system that we've seen. The other thing is the things that are wrong with capitalism are probably wrong because of bad actors. Just like how in socialism, most of the time those don't work because of bad actors. And the bad actors in socialism have genocided. That's it.
A state mechanism of control, which exists in neoliberal capitalism as well.
And they'll do anything to stay in power. So
This is actually an area where I very much diverge from other socialists, I would say, or even more orthodox Marxists. That I believe the neoliberal mechanisms of control, specifically, it's just, how do I describe it? Free market. Markets are better than the government at dealing with everything.
Okay.
So I think that there is two different, as reductive as possible, there's two different types of control. Control is always going to happen. This is what the state is there to do, right? Under liberal capitalist democracies in the West, you have a neoliberal mechanism of control that dulls the masses through commodities, gives you the false notion of choice. You feel like you have 32 different brands of Oreos, even though they're like owned by 3 companies that price fix, right?
Loco.
And they basically control all matter of commodities, and those markets are completely captured. But there's this idea that there are, this endless, boundless amount of choices that you can choose from. On the other side, the more authoritarian mechanisms of control, which have existed
What's
in...
your opinion?
I like the neoliberal one. I think that even in a socialist state, you should still very much give the people the false notion of choice and make it feel like they have a say in the process while doing the bidding of... I mean, it's a pretty cynical worldview, but I think that, that's what states are supposed to do.
Let me ask you this.
And that will create a structure where there are significantly less people who are like, I hate the system right now. I don't feel happy. I don't feel good in the system that I exist under. So I should, do counter-revolutionary capitalist reforms.
Well, and likewise, I don't think there's that many people in Sweden or Norway who are saying, no, we need to move to a pure socialist because everybody there is provided. I don't think there's a large... I'm speaking at...
No, you're absolutely right. You're actually 100% correct.
So like...
Some Orthodox Marxists actually hate the welfare state for this reason, because the welfare state is a continuation of capitalism by offering certain amenities.
Seems like
the liberal capitalism has thrived and has created a structure where like the inherent contradictions that exist under capitalism that I think everyone would agree with, including yourself, those inherent contradictions become a little bit more muddied, and they never end up getting to a point where they converge and capitalism erodes into some socialist formation.
Let me be, I guess, more specific. If you're in a socialist country, is there one party or multiple parties?
It depends. I mean...
Because one party's scary, right? Can we agree on that? A one-party system is not a good system.
I think you and I would agree that we...
No, I'm just asking you. I don't care about the United States. I'm asking you about socialism.
I think that there are different forms of governance, and the United States is not that different.
I don't care about the United States. I just want to talk about a socialist
I think
country.
that no matter what happens, the state does what the state is supposed to do. You can either do it at the behest of your citizens because you genuinely, earnestly believe that, like, that is the best possible way of developing a society, or you do it at the behest of capital owners and capitalism.
So you're saying you don't think it matters if there's one party or...
I don't think it matters as far as I care about direct democratic participation in local in local.
One-party systems with socialism or communism has pretty much always been a catastrophe.
Yeah.
A human humanitarian disaster.
No, I agree with that.
There's just so much risk in having one party.
I agree with that. I think that a multi-party system is obviously going to be better. My point is that it doesn't even matter if you have a parliament. It doesn't even matter if you have a multi-party system. The changes that are being made in one direction or the other are oftentimes incredibly marginal. And the differences are not born out of like the party disagreements. The differences are born out of like genuine material conflict, like even including like the Civil War. It's never like the kindness of people's or like one party of individuals being like, we are kind, we want to do good things, and the other side is bad and they want to do bad things.
So what I want to say was this then.
What?
If you're in a socialist country with multiple parties, and one of the parties is a capitalist party, which would surely exist. What would you do if that party started gaining momentum? And it was clearly like people wanted that route. They wanted that route.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
I think I would do what America has done, not to the same degree.
Which is what?
Not to the same degree as like McCarthyist trials or anything like that. But I would offer additional amenities to ensure that people are comfortable and happy, because I feel like
But what do you do if they're like, nah, fuck that, we're doing capitalism?
Well, if everything is given to you, at that point, if every single thing is given to you, if all of your problems are solved, which I think we can both agree is not under capitalism and has not happened.
No.
If all of those problems have been solved, then there is no need for conflict of that regard.
But they're saying, no, we want
an ultimate,
because they're like, yo, this is a free country, right? Well, we want to do capitalism. We think the market should regulate the prices and shit. Like, we don't think the workplace should be socialized.
Okay, that's a great question.
And what if
you have to ask why though at that point, because
people never can be explained by why anyway. You know what I mean?
Some people are gonna be dumb. You're right.
It's like you don't. It's just gonna exist. You know it is.
Yeah.
And so if the will of the people is to go back to do more of a social democracy, is that something that a socialist country should move towards, or should there be resistance in the government to keep socialism?
I think the resistance should be akin to how capitalist governments have resisted historically any kind of socialist movement, not to that same degree of violence, but I think that yes, the solution to that would always be education and offering more
re-education.
Re-education, certainly, yeah.
Oh no.
I know that that's like a trigger word.
Camps.
No, not like that. I know there's a trigger word because everyone goes, "Oh, re-education." What do you mean? Like immediately people think like, "Are you
China
talking
does
about
that.
Are you talking about like resident schools? Are you talking about the
has
Xinjiang?" Yeah,
re-education.
100%. They do. They do it. They did it in Xinjiang, which I
isn't
think
good,
was,
right?
No, I don't agree with that. Yeah, I don't think it was good. This is something I have openly criticized as well. Like that's not good. The massive surveillance apparatus that they built in Xinjiang is not good.
So what would be good about a socialist re-education camp for capitalists?
It wouldn't necessarily. I don't think it'd be camps. I mean, it depends on. It depends on crimes, right? Like, are people committing crimes at the behest of this? Because if there's a socialist state, and someone is doing like white terror, let's say, or someone is doing South Korean style, purges of communists, which has happened historically in every country that America is aligned with, because they were anti-communist, where they've launched, military dictatorships. Whether we recognize it or not, those things have happened, right? So in a situation like that, I think if there's any kind of like terrorism happening,
sure, yeah. If there's violence, that's obvious.
I do think that there should be an enforcement mechanism, and in that enforcement mechanism, I think like rehabilitation, which would include re-education as well, would probably be a lot better than like a prison structure where they have slavery like in the United States of America.
I'm still a little bit confused about the ideal mechanism of a socialist country, where people still have individual freedoms to like form, to assemble, and can also be like, yeah, I'm a capitalist, so what? And we're trying to grow our movement. I don't understand the organization of the socialist free country, because it seems to me to have a socialist country, there needs to be some amount of dampening of, rights.
Well,
because for what I said.
Yes and no, because my point is always the same. It's that this is a constant. This is consistent. What you're describing is consistent with the American formation. It's consistent with capitalism. It's just a reality that will always exist. Violence, and who gets to do violence, is an inherent part of politics, because politics is, at the end of the day, a distribution of resources and a distribution of violence. Who gets to have what resources and who doesn't have the resources as a consequence of that. And if they do something to get those resources, what the state will be able to do. The state has a monopoly on violence
wonder if
across
he's
the board, no matter
never
what
going to
happens,
define
right?
What he's talking about
I'm not
when
an
he says
anarchist.
violence.
A lot of anarchists will get mad at me for saying this, but
Is it
the state
discrimination?
should have some level of a violent mechanism, because
Well,
no
there's
matter what
wars and
happens,
stuff,
and there's different forms of violence as
Yeah.
well. The structural violence of poverty, or direct violence in the form of military boots on the ground, military warfare,
just all kinds of
imperialism,
process,
police
so
violence, police brutality. These are all
pseudo-intellectual.
different forms of violence.
There will be some exertional force required
Yes.
to maintain a socialist country.
Yes, not just a social country, any country.
Sure, any country.
Yes, I agree. Until we reach a point of I guess, until we reach a point of production, and our productive output has gotten to a point where it's so streamlined and so organized that there is no need for a state. But I don't know if we will ever be able to get there, where the state withers away and we have a classless, borderless, moneyless society.
Yeah. I mean, if it is, it's
Like
not in a
like
long time.
techno-communist.
It'd have to be like post World War III or something. Let me ask you, I guess, another angle here. Worker exploitation seems to be at the heart of socialism and communism.
Yes.
And so I want to ask you this question. If an employee is fairly compensated, and by fairly I mean that factors like work, compensation, they're being paid well beyond the means of living. They can afford comfortable housing, food, pleasure, vacation, savings, all the things people would want to do with money. If they're provided in all those ways that we see as important, is that still exploitation?
In the Marxian sense, yes. In the capitalist sense, no. Capitalism is
And
the
social. So,
'cause-
Mark, when you say Marxism, you're talking
Yeah.
about
Remember,
socialism.
yes,
right?
yes, yes.
All of
So,
this is coming from a guy.
in the
When we hear Hassan
Marxist
talking,
perspective, under
he's a good guy.
Marxian economics, Marxist theory, exploitation
Profits
is not a
reap
good or bad
from
thing.
editors
It is
and
just
all
a
sorts of
thing
other
that
things
happens.
that he
Okay.
And it
essentially
goes
has
back
working
to
for him
something
for
I've
free.
described many, many times over, which is
He would
that
not describe any of the people
there are
who
two
does
classes.
Any of the work on his channel as
There is the
employees.
labor class, the wage laborers, the proletariat,
when we're talking
and
about these
the
people who
bourgeois
come up
class, the
with
capital
big
owning class,
systems
right?
that
And these
exploit
two
workers,
classes
blah, blah,
have
blah.
two
He is those people.
inherently contradictory interests.
Almost like
You work
inherently.
jobs when you had a boss
You
and
almost
someone was
have to.
paying you, and you have been a boss, so you have gone through both of these stages. So, as someone who worked in a job, as a wage laborer, as a W-2 employee, or 1099 contractor, you wanted to work the least amount of hours for the most amount of pay. That's understandable. That's like perfectly reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Like, you want more money and you want to work less hours. You want to have more freedom. Your boss, on the other hand, wants you to work the most amount of hours for the least amount of pay, like that they can get away with.
stuff and
Yeah.
destiny
So,
take from less
this
than a week
inherent
ago.
contradiction is at the heart of capitalism, and is how commodities are produced under a capitalist mode of production. Now, when you have this imbalance, those who do have capital end up always being able to pay you much less than your actual
So
output.
that is what's happening now.
Yeah.
My question is, in a situation, as I outlined, where the employees are fairly provided for, which I outlined before, is that when I say exploitation, I mean, like, I think that also has a vernacular, like when the ruling class is committing some kind of harm or injustice on their workers.
No, it's beyond that. You could be paying your employees fairly and still engage in the act of exploitation.
So then, because I don't want
From
to
a
get caught up on that, because you're
perspective.
saying exploitation is neutral by its
Yes,
def-
exploitation in the Marxian sense is not good or bad. It's just descriptive. A lot of what Marx has talked about with
But so
respect
what
to
does he mean
capitalism
then-
is descriptive.
Because what does he mean then when he goes the exploitation of workers? Clearly, he wants to end the exploitation of workers.
Yes, of course.
So is it still exploitation of workers if they're fairly provided for?
Yes,
It is.
because the fairness in this regard is not met on the metrics of like living standards, but instead on the metrics of what their output is. So when and this gets into the labor theory of value,
Excuse me,
right?
goddamn.
The labor theory of value, which is different than marginal utility, which is what we use currently when we ascribe, when we say this is this much, like something is this valuable, right? Ice cream is $4, but if it's really hot out, maybe ice cream is $5 because, well, there's a little bit of scarcity on the supply, but the demand has gone up, so now ice cream is more expensive. Whereas from a Marxian perspective, the value of that ice cream is stable. It's just what kind of labor went into the production of it, what were the resources used to make that ice cream, what kind of capital was put into the ice cream factory,
So even
all
if the
of that,
employee-
and then also the moving part in that situation would be the labor of it.
If the employee is extremely satisfied
Yeah.
and they feel well provided for, I mean, in a sense, it's like, who are you to tell him who's being exploited?
Well, you're
Again, I
You're
know
saying
you
that
want to
again
get
because, like,
caught up on that,
because it's
the
not-
definition
because
of that word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's what I would say in that situation is this, right? Relying on the magnanimous nature of your boss
Yeah.
and hoping that like your boss doesn't succumb to greed and choose to change certain things about your workplace conditions can be great. And there are people like yourself out there who are, as far as I understand, pretty good bosses, right? But that is never going to be that's never going to be the
Right.
constant. That's never going to be the case.
But in social democracy,
Yeah.
you set up the bumpers, you set up the systems where
Yeah.
they have to do that.
Well,
That's the bare minimum they have to do.
well, and then we go back to the erosion of the amenities. That
I don't
the
feel
state
like that's a
offers and the
strong enough
regulation.
argument to say socialism is better.
No, as long as there is some kind of
It's not a good enough argument.
capitalist
Because
compensation in any
nothing
sort of
he's saying
sector,
is, like,
they will
exclusive
always
to
choose to
capitalism.
monopolize. This is what most companies, like this is what every company does when they become a company, a corporation. Their job is their goal is to inevitably become a monopoly. You can do that by
Didn't-
rent
Well,
seeking.
so what? So what? If they still have to follow the rules.
Well, no, when you are becoming a monopoly,
Yeah.
you are either engaging in horizontal integration and expansion or vertical integration and expansion, mergers, acquisitions, and you know what Amazon has done, for example, in e-commerce is a great example of this. And when you get to that point, especially under a capitalist state that still has market reforms, you end up using the additional capital that you've accumulated in the form of profits from your workers to lobby the government and erode the safety nets.
But you're talking like it's a guaranteed. And again, I
It
go
has
back.
been a guarantee every single
well, and it's been a
Problem is,
guarantee
in
by the same
socialism,
metric that any
the
socialist country
politicians are just your
devolves
friends,
into
and they just do it.
disaster. I mean, it's not fair to put that out there like it's just given.
Yeah.
Because on the other flip coin, you can say,
not just
this,
given
like I
that
mentioned,
those-
socialism.
that
There's going to be
like,
people moving towards
guardrails, like,
capitalism.
for the-
So socialist
But it's just
nation
it's
states,
too hypothetical.
socialist nation
Too
states, however,
hypothetical.
historically, most of them at least, have not eroded or been destroyed due to like people who are just like, I want to be capitalist.
And
Usually those people are being goaded or supported, facilitated
guardrails,
by
those
a much more
boundaries that
powerful
he's talking
nation
about actually go away
that
faster.
is
So,
using
and more violent.
the inherent greed to their advantage to cause divisions,
shorter amount of
but the real material issues in socialist nation states, historical socialism, real socialism in the real world that has happened, has always been due to mishaps, famine, or the government exercising too much authoritarian
Yeah, you could
control.
say the same
These
thing,
sorts
though.
of things. These sorts of things are the real reasons as to why socialist nation states have failed. Not necessarily their economic mode of production switching over to a more labor-focused economy, and then also there are so many different types of socialist developments, like a socialist mode of production, that there is no like one absolute perfect one, and I'd be a liar if I told you I know which one it is. You know what I mean?
So go back to the original question. Let's just ignore this theory that in social democracy, and I'll say this, obviously we have antitrust laws that are not good, that are not
Yeah.
been effective in the least bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I would
also
ask you
something
why.
you can regulate.
No, but I would ask you why.
Well, because our
Revamped.
government is super corrupt.
Why is the government corrupt?
Because people are inherently flawed.
You think the government's corrupt because people are inherently flawed? Corruption in that sense, I disagree with you there.
Some people, not all people.
No,
That's another thing I said.
I
People
know.
are inherently greedy and people lost their mind. Some people are.
The
Actually,
reason-
I want to talk about that at better length, but go ahead.
That's actually a great take as well. We can cover that as well.
Yeah, I do want to.
I always butcher this quote, but I forget who it was. It might have been Mark Fisher, might have been someone else. But assuming that greed is inherent in human nature under a capitalist organization of the economy is like assuming the black lung is
I'm
inherent
not
in human
saying
nature
capitalist.
if you work at the fucking coal mine.
See, that's not a good analogy.
Because
No, it's a
you're
terrible
In my
right.
opinion.
Greed is a part of it. Self-interest is a part of it. Not greed necessarily, but self-interest is a part of human existence. Why we have built societies and how we've
Self-interest.
done it. However,
It's a biological survival
exactly.
mechanism.
However,
If we didn't have self-interest, we would never we wouldn't survive as a species.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
You're absolutely correct. My argument always, and many Marxist arguments actually, have always been around individualism and self-interest, and how socialism, as a matter of fact, creates more opportunities for individual liberties for the person. It's only been sold and told to people as though it is, this gray, brutalist architecture, city blocks. You have to, do your government mandated coal mining job or whatever the fuck. But the ultimate goal has always been to open up more individual liberties. I'll give you an example of socialization that you and I both agree with, right? Healthcare. Nationalized healthcare or socialized medicine in general gives you more liberties as a person that you can actually leave your job if you fucking
That would
hate
happen
it.
in social democracy as well.
Yes. However, like I've said, there has to be the countermeasures in a social democracy the capitalist forces are significantly more powerful because ultimately the state is still operating as a capitalist state. That is still the norm.
So I think we're having like a kind of just like a disconnect, or not a disconnect, but maybe at an impasse on that idea. But what I'll say, I want to give you a specific example because this is interesting to me. Let's just take this workplace as an example because we're all familiar with it. So I started my career 10 plus years ago, and I was successful by myself with 0 employees.
Yes.
I made a lot of money. I did well for myself. And then, 5 years ago into my career, I made the podcast, which obviously you all are watching now. So let's say we go back to 5 years ago when I hired
Gotta
Dan
bounce right
as a
to the
freelance. You started as like a
Coming down.
consultant.
Yeah, or a freelancer. Yeah.
And obviously you moved to full time, and I'll get to that.
Yeah.
So he started as like a freelance consultant. So what would be a fair way of compensating him for that?
In your situation, it's like, what is the most like socialist way of doing it? Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, because that's
Yeah,
what we're
okay.
talking about, right?
It would be profit sharing. What
so
that
I
means
just
is
so this is
What
this is
do you mean
interesting.
profit
Hold on.
sharing?
this is interesting. You're right because
Yeah.
this is actually the most difficult aspect, in my opinion, of
Socialism
like
moves away
trying to
from,
create
like,
the most
capital,
ethical way
money,
of
profit,
existing under a
as,
capitalist
like,
organization
a
of the economy, while you are
driving
also
factor for your economy.
productive.
So why would you use
and
profit
you're
sharing?
you're doing like an owned and operated media company where you are the product.
So I hired Dan as a consultant.
Yeah.
Just to help us out to get things
And I have hired
beautified.
people as well.
So then I'm profit sharing with him. How much profit am I sharing with him?
So the way I do it, and I think this will be, this is instructive for many others as well. The way I do it, like the most ethical way to do it, is basically try to make an assessment. Sure, there's market considerations on the one hand, like what the normal wage would look like, but that is like the minimum. You know what I mean? That is like the minimum. That is the worst possible amount to pay someone in the form of wages, in my opinion.
Okay.
So you have the market considerations on the one side, which I don't necessarily care too much about. On the other side, you have your productive output, right? Let's say you were making $10 before Dan came on, and now that Dan came on, you're making...
That wouldn't be measurable.
No, I know. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I know. Which is why I'm saying it's a tricky situation.
It seems almost impossible.
Yeah. Well, technically, the other side is also very cruel, but we just have
But that's
normalized.
not true, because in social democracy, people are fairly compensated. It's not cruel, in my opinion.
No, there's. I don't think. I think we
people
think
could be
of social
more or
democracies- we
more
think of social
fairly,
democracies-
less fairly compensated, but like generally speaking, they'd be more fairly compensated than what you would see today.
Yes, in comparison to the United States of America, which
I don't know why I
technically
said
would be a mixed market or social democracy, social democracies in other countries, there is better compensation.
So
Said I
here's
gotta
the
dodge in the other
unintended
direction.
consequence of that.
Due to regulation, government regulation.
If I'm just hiring Dan to come in and help me with cameras and stuff, and I have to cut him in on profit share, people are not going to hire as many people. They're going to think a lot more before they bring more people on.
Well, can I just chime in real quick? Just to clarify this point, are you still talking about the period of time where I was
Yes.
working as a contractor?
Yes. I haven't gotten to the full time yet. Well, we're going to move to that.
Right. I will just say that at the time, I was essentially operating as my own business as well, because you weren't my only client at the time.
Right. Okay.
I did that professionally for a lot of people, and you were one of many people that I would come and do shows with until you offered me a full-time thing. So just because we're using the specific example, I just wanted to clarify that, because I think that matters in what the dynamic was when we were initially working together.
I don't think that matters in such that I'm more focused just on the profit
So
sharing.
the reason why I was bringing
And
up
like the implications on to a business and business owner of that.
Okay, but the reason why I was bringing up the revenue is because let's say you were making you're making $10. Dan comes on, now you're making $15.
Yeah.
Right? Dan has brought in $5 extra of revenue for you, and I think that the best possible way to engage with that would be to cut Dan in on offer Dan living wages plus whatever Dan has brought in the form of revenue.
Here's a big problem.
And that moves into direction like you make, and then later down the line you make $100,000 and
It moves with
now Dan is moving with it as well.
Here's where this seems more like it's a nice theory, but like in application it makes no sense. Who decides how much value he's brought? How could you possibly decide that? If my show is growing, Dan joins, and let's say I now I'm making $15, but the show was organically growing. How can I attribute all 5 of that to Dan?
You're absolutely correct on this as well. This is a big weakness.
50-50 with him?
This is something that I do not have an answer for either, which is why,
It doesn't
like
make
I
sense.
said, I said, you make do with you try to do your very best.
Can I be? This seems like a big problem to say you don't have a solution for it if you're advocating for a socialist society.
I agree, which is why I
It
always
doesn't seem like it's ready.
Well, can I just chime in on this? This isn't theoretical. There are lots of companies that do profit sharing.
I do this as
I
well.
know, but it's not like.
But like
let's
big
say this.
and they have various methods of how they do it.
The way
There are ways to do it that make sense.
I do this
But the
as
way
well,
that
Ethan.
socialism does it in the purest sense is like Dan joined 10 to 15. Dan gets half of the 15.
So
that's his
Ethan,
labor.
Ethan, this is if we're talking pure theory.
Hold on, one sec.
If we're talking pure theory,
Yeah.
I would rather have an imperfect structure that still
It's
absolutely
not
offers
imperfect.
better.
It doesn't work.
Well,
If you don't know
the
how people
capitalist-
get paid, how does it even work?
the capitalist structure also is imperfect in the exact same
Well,
way.
it's functioning at least.
Yes, I know, but the idea that like the other structure would not function is not correct. Especially when we're telling you that even under a capitalist organization economy, there's plenty of different ways of doing
But
this.
there needs to
one
be-
of the most successful ones that I also have is a cooperative, right? I have a cooperative, collectively organized podcast, for example, where we just split it 5 ways regardless. Obviously, my output in that situation, given that I am the host with the largest audience, would significantly outweigh my producers, for example, who could be paid with
Remember,
a very fair, very
in
fat
socialism,
market
how much of
wage,
his audience
right?
he brings
Market wage plus
matters.
market wage times 3 is what I could pay him, and it would still be significantly less than what he gets paid now.
Yeah.
Because we're cutting him in 5 ways. We're splitting everything 5 ways.
Yeah.
And that is a perfectly viable way to do it because
I think that's very generous,
In-
but I don't think you should be forced to do that.
I think that
I think you should be forced to pay him what we've determined as a minimum wage where he can live in where he lives in a comfortable state.
yeah, I don't agree
think
with that.
and I don't think
And
that
it's
it
not it
prevents
goes
people
beyond
from being
it goes beyond wages too.
generous.
It goes
either.
beyond wages as well. There's also another aspect of this that many people fail to consider, which is decision making. So there's also the structure of decision making, the structure of autonomy. When we are setting up the time for when we are going to shoot the podcast, like everyone has to be on board with it. It has to work around every single person's schedule. These are all scheduling conflicts exist usually, but it's like in good faith, every single person is like giving their most, giving their all, and it ultimately, I think, creates a pretty solid product.
Let me ask you. So, do you acknowledge that in this socialist theoretical country, where I go from 10 to 15 and I give Dan 15, hypothetically for any worker joining, that I, as a business owner, I would be less likely to be hiring people,
Certainly.
and that's not good, is it?
No, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all.
Because like I don't know, because like I've gone through a lot of people that did not work out. Mm-hmm. And they were hired on like let's say
You can still fire them.
exploratory. So is it at will employment in this situation?
In this
I can just
structure,
fire them?
you can still, of course, like you can still have issues with an employee and fire them. It's ironic because like Japan, for example, is like the most capitalist country on the planet, and yet in Japan they have this like very unique culture where getting into a place of business is very difficult. But once you actually have made it into the corporation, they don't fire you. They can't fire you. They never fire you. What they do is they ostracize you and make you into a social pariah within the company,
Right.
and try to get you to quit.
Is it because they're trying to avoid paying some kind of severance, or is it just
No, it's like
culture?
it's both cultural and if I'm not mistaken, it could literally
That's so
have
gnarly.
legal implications as well. But it works, right?
Okay,
It technically
well,
works.
But I'm saying, why is it? Hey, why
more
is
you
it
said
not
it,
a
more-
good? So as a business owner, I think the fact that I was not super hesitant to hire lots of people,
Mm-hmm.
find the crew that worked. I worked with a lot of people. It did not who were not compatible.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to burn through enough people to find a team that worked, right?
Kaya,
and
stop
so
by.
if I was so hesitant to hire people because I have to profit share with them, I would do like a way more strenuous interview process.
That
it would take
seems you're-
way longer.
Yeah, you're making an argument for why it's stronger. Like you
I don't
lucked out
think
with
so
Dan.
at all.
You lucked out with Dan.
I don't think that's
Oh,
a good
thanks.
argument because first of all, it's good that people can go try a bunch of jobs before they find one that works. And as an employer, it's good to be able to try a bunch of people. Do you find the right fit for employees? If I had to go through this strenuous process to find each one of them, this podcast may very well likely not exist as it does today. Might not exist at all.
I disagree with you on that for sure. I think that
Okay, why?
it's better to have
Why?
a strenuous process of ensuring that you
Even
have
for
the
like,
best possible
even
person.
for like the most entry level job.
Yeah, I think that it's.
But
it's
then
perfectly valid.
doesn't that
And
result in people not getting work?
so, yes, it will.
So there's-
but then we're
Yeah.
talking about like an entirely separate way of organizing the economy.
Let me go
doesn't-
back. Why
doesn't
is it
work the
better?
same
Why
way.
is it better that I have to go through like extraneous
I mean, we're
full-on
talking about
HR
hypotheticals.
processes?
We're talking about hypotheticals.
Yeah.
In this situation.
Yeah.
So it can I can just hypothesize that you found Dan. Not even hypothesize.
Well, no, we're not talking. Well, we're talking hypothetically, but we're
Like,
talking.
you found Dan, so you clearly.
but we went through
were
a lot of
able-
people before we found that.
Yeah. Well, you could have arrived at Dan as well, is what I'm saying.
It would have
Through
taken a lot
strenuous
longer, and the
process.
business might not have survived.
Okay. So
There was a point where the podcast almost got wrapped up.
yeah.
So why is it better in theory to have that extraneous of a hiring process than being able to kind of just people try things out?
This is only one aspect of it, but what you're talking about, like the extraneous hiring process, also would exist under a social democracy as well. It should exist in some form under a social democracy as well, like
Why?
some level of protection from being fired.
But so in social democracy, you're not rev sharing. So there's like this
Yeah.
big thing that you're like, I'm a business owner. I've created this business from my own sweat and blood and tears for the last 10 years. And I'm making a lot of money. I got to hire this guy who I don't know anything about, and I got to cut him in on my profits. That doesn't exist in social democracy. So the risk to me as the business owner is way,
It
way,
does
way,
exist,
way
but
less.
it's much smaller, to a much
Way less.
smaller degree, because it's supposed to exist through unions. And once again, it's not just revenue sharing.
not, but it's a big difference,
everyone
bro.
always focuses on that aspect of it, but rev sharing comes in the form of benefits. Rev sharing comes in the form of like how much we invest in R&D, for example, or what kind of R&D initiatives we invest in. All of these decisions are made by a board.
Well, that's
That
all
is a
regulated.
fiduciary
That can be
responsibility
regulated
to the
in social democracy.
shareholders that is not regulated under a social democracy. This is the major
What
point
do you
of
mean by
contention.
rev share then? Because you see, in our example,
Like in Germany, they have a trade union representative that sits on the board of executives, but that's only one aspect of a larger board that
Germany's
is
a
still
cap-
representing the interests
Germany's
of the
capitalist.
shareholders, those who own the company, who never have seen the company. They
there are
can, even
no
globally own it,
real-life
right?
examples
So
he can
having one
actually
vote in
give
that
for
situation
anything he's
is not
talking
as
about.
good, in
There
my
are
opinion,
no
as having
real-life
all
examples.
of the vote, all of the power, making these decisions
It
as a
all
collective,
more or less dissolve.
something that kind of
There's none in
is not
Europe,
legally
as far as
enforced
I can
here,
tell.
right, in your
There's none
structure,
in-
but you
well,
abide by
there's
because
China.
you're a nice guy. Many people are not going to be like that.
No,
Many,
exactly
and
zero
I'm
people
saying that
who
we shouldn't
probably
rely
like
on
to go
the
live
magnanimity,
in-
and we don't
magnanimous
have
nature
to.
of
We're
law.
going back to this point because we don't have to with the right.
Well,
rules
even
in
an
place.
example
But let
like
me ask you,
the
'cause
one I
we
mentioned
got
in
off
Germany
point.
still yields terrible, still is susceptible
Germany's
to
not
the
a social
influence
democracy.
of capital.
Let me ask you this.
Wait, yes, it is.
Germany arguably is.
Yes,
not
every-
as much as.
Okay, I don't know a
Nordic
lot about
countries.
Germany,
Even
so I'm not gonna. I don't want to get
America
into
is a
that.
social democracy as well. The problem is, like, American social democracy is a laughable example of.
So let's
social
not use it then.
democracy.
But going back, why is it better? Because I don't think I ever got an answer. To have a strenuous hiring process.
Why is it better to have a strenuous? When you engage in commodity production with another person, I think it's perfectly valid to ensure that this person is not going to be like a scumbag and cheat you, fuck you over. I think it's good business practice, even in a capitalist sense, to ensure that the person that you're hiring is not like some fucking
Well, right.
random
That's
dickhead.
just
Yeah.
That's just common sense.
And the more you
but you
grow,
do acknowledge that. So you do acknowledge the hesitancy to hire people.
I do.
But
I'm
you
not
don't. You
necessarily
don't.
saying it's a
I don't
bad
know what. Okay. We'll move on.
I don't think it's a bad.
I guess a bit of an impasse again.
because and as companies grow, you have different people in different units that also are engaging in hiring. Like, it's just that workers now have more of a say in which direction the company should go, and that's a good thing.
This
It's not a
dude worked
bad
for me for like a week, and on my business I spent 5 years building. I don't want to give him a decision on where the company goes.
I think that.
Why should he have that right?
Well,
you know
no,
what I mean?
I'm not saying the janitor comes in and unilaterally makes decisions. That's not how that works.
But I'm curious how it does work.
So it's communication. The other person
Really
is a
good
human
saying
being as
how it
well.
doesn't
If
work.
you have a major disagreement, then you look for someone else to work in that position. This is how it works.
Okay.
The
I'm
only
not getting
difference
a
in that
clear answer on the
situation
rev
is that you don't
share
have the fear of like subsistence living at the other end of that bargain. Whereas like you have better amenities, better protections, and
So by
therefore
rev
you're more
share, you just
comfortable.
mean good living conditions? Because
The idea is
that's what I'm
that
already saying. That I don't think that makes socialism unique because we can provide good living conditions and
we
benefits.
can, but we haven't. Now that, by the way,
But,
one aspect
again,
of social democracy that we've talked about is the domestic one. We have yet to even uncover the other, much worse side of social democracies, which is resource extraction in the third world and imperialism, and that is a necessity under global capitalism. and that is the reason why we have the haves and the have-nots. On the domestic level, you believe that there is a regulatory agency that
was the
can make
USSR?
things more just.
I don't feel prepared to have a
ensure
conversation about the third world stuff because I'm not
USSR
super
was
familiar with
Russia
it.
Perfectly fine.
But, like, I can-
But,
I mean, I
but
can
you
give my
understand that, like,
opinion.
that's a
Countries.
part
Of
of
course.
how
I mean,
everything
listen,
works.
Essentially getting
so
annexed
exploiting
by
in the truest sense of the word is definitely what's been happening.
even
to,
on a capitalist understanding, that's like
Yeah.
hyper
I mean,
exploitation.
Countries
clearly,
would just
I
be
think that
slave
all humans
markets
on this
for
earth deserve
Like
rights
first world
and
countries are
comfort
basically just
and,
your inferiors.
Yeah.
Third
and a
world
right.
countries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It is funny though,
Quality of
like
life.
Just be-
one thing I will mention in the domestic,
Animals?
going
I
back to
don't
the
know.
labor force thing is that like we're so susceptible and so programmed under capitalist dogma that we refuse to see a world outside of it, and we're so captured in that worldview that oftentimes the number one counter against a socialist governance or democracy in the workplace or anything like that is always like, what do you want, the fucking janitor just came in yesterday to make these decisions? Like, no one said he's the CEO
I just
now.
want to understand how it works because you keep saying rev
Yeah.
share.
Rev share is only one component
if
of
the
it.
janitor
Rev
don't-
share
no,
can
let
be
me tell you this.
democratically assigned.
If the let's say what?
Okay, here is an example. When I first started the podcast, I was originally under Cast. It was fucking terrible. We quit. We started our own podcast, me and Will. We needed a producer because we don't have that skill set. We needed someone to change the cameras and maybe do a little bit of, someone to post the videos, do the captions, titling, thumbnailing, right? So in that situation, we looked for someone, we found someone, and we were splitting it 3 ways. We were splitting the revenue 3 ways, anything that we made, right? And even before that, I was also giving March money as well to make sure that
I
he
don't
like
remember
at least
a
had a fucking
side swing like
had
that.
had a revenue opportunity even when
felt
we
new.
weren't generating a lot of revenue.
Okay.
Right. So, what did I do after that? The podcast grew. Fear and now has 5 cast members. We brought in Austin Show, my good friend, and Cutie Cinderella. And when that happened, us 3, we got together and we had a conversation.
Okay.
Do we need more hosts? Do we think that this will be beneficial?
Right.
Right? Do we think that we will end up making, more revenue, generating more revenue in the long run?
Right.
Will we have people with unique creative ideas? Like, I care more about the creative output than anything else, than revenue. I haven't even touched the fucking revenue that I've generated from the podcast. And we got together and we had a conversation. And I think that is a significantly more equitable and just and better way of doing business than
talking
me
about a board of
hiring
directors.
March, me giving Will some money originally, like a fat salary, or maybe cutting in on the rev share for him, and then giving March like a super high fucking wage, right? Way higher than like the average producer, and then making these decisions single-handedly.
Let me add another aspect to your example. Let's say you need to hire a cleaner to come clean the office. She works for the podcast. She comes, she cleans the office. She works full time. How
Yeah.
do you pay her?
The cleaner side of this is not like, I mean, I don't have an office like that, but the janitorial services
theoretically.
in a theoretical situation where we have someone
Full-time cleaner.
that needs to do it, yeah, we would also get together as a unit.
Yeah.
Okay, the existing company would get together and decide what level, just like hiring the
Yeah,
2
just
other
decide it,
hosts,
or just
we
need to
decide
block.
what level of revenue
like, break that
cuts
hand or
we are
something
going
to
to take from
do
our
it.
5%
I don't know
to
if I'm
give
actually
You're making
to
her a
the other
job offer.
person.
It's not really that different than a
So
salary.
and once they get that job, and there are many different ways of doing this, but once they get that job, and let's say they worked for 2 years, 3 years, then they have a say in the revenue sharing structure and the power sharing structure as well. Because it doesn't have to happen like instantaneously. A lot of people forget that,
Well,
like,
my problem is that in
Yeah.
the socialist economy, this is being regulated by the government. People can get together now and decide to do whatever the fuck they want in their company, and that's great, you know. But in the socialistic economy, there's rules that says you need to pay her X amount of rev share.
what you're saying is not true.
Okay.
You want to know why?
Yes.
Because you want a social democracy, which kind of exists, and market regulation exists under capitalist formations, and plenty of capital owners hate that. As a matter of fact, I would say universally capital owners hate any kind of market regulation, which is why they choose to erode it as best as they possibly can, or they use it to their advantage to create an
confused.
artificial barrier of entry into certain sectors.
I'm saying in a socialist economy, there's going to be laws that
Just
say
like
how
there
you-
are laws in a
I'm
capitalist
just
economy
asking
that
you,
capital
in
owners hate.
socialism, how I'm
all
saying
just, like,
the
what about
government
it?
is telling you how much you need to pay the janitor.
That's not how that would work.
Then how would it work? Because
It
what
would,
if-
it would be government.
Isn't that how is that functionally different than a minimum wage in our
that's my
society?
point. That's my point.
Yeah.
Why
Okay,
do they?
well then-
So,
Well,
so
why do
I
you,
think
but socialism is much more radical. We're talking.
It's not.
Social.
It doesn't have to be.
Moving
I think it's,
America,
It does,
moving
by
America
definition.
to a purely socialistic society. Instead of my thing is, I think social democracy is better than socialism. And you guys are explaining something that to me sounds a lot like something that we can already do without this huge undertaking of changing our economy from a capitalistic social democracy one to a socialism one. You're
Yeah.
talking about a minimum wage. We already do that, and we can already do better with that via regulations.
But,
so why
but the reason why we haven't been able to is because, like, I think the best way to explain it is this way, okay? You like capitalism with socialist characteristics. I like socialism with capitalist characteristics.
Yo, you just said that. So,
So-
we're both social
So
democrats.
that doesn't mean that I'm
What's the
no. I
difference?
still believe that the government
Wait, what's
should
the
be.
difference now? You
the
said you like
difference-
socialism with
The difference
capitalism.
is no. I said I like socialism
Yeah.
with capitalist characteristics, meaning that the governing governing economy, like the entire economy, still revolves around a socialist mode of production where the owners, the workers are the owners. They
economy
own the
wouldn't
means
be
of
able to-
production. They
it
have
wouldn't
the
work.
they have a say in their benefits. They have a say in
And
what
I can
happens
fire
in
them
the
whenever
company.
I want, though.
Well, there will still obviously be protections against like unjust firings and whatnot, and there should be certainly.
There are now.
and there are now as well. Except
Really good, yeah.
America is a great example
In
of.
California, there are really.
America
good.
is a great example, hower, of like how there aren't.
Which
is
how
the
it
right to
shouldn't
work
be,
state.
and it shouldn't be that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's not that way is because we have capitalism with like laughable socialist characteristics.
Dude, that's.
we don't even
I
have
find
any
it
socialist
very
characteristics.
interesting that you're saying you want socialism with capitalist characteristics.
Capitalist characteristics in the sense that it doesn't touch the means of production or the mode of production, but offers an abundance of resources and offers the idea that you have freedom. One of the major problems with former historic
Oh my God.
socialist projects have always been commodity production being streamlined on necessity and not necessarily silly things like lighter production, industries that revolve around making, I don't know, chocolate and coffee. Coffee was a major problem in East Germany. So like things of that nature that people need, I think those are things that we need to work on. And that capitalism, I think, has done a much better job at offering to people, and that has a very sedating influence on the masses.
I don't see what
Consumerism.
I don't see what's so great and humanizing about hiring a janitor for 0.00015% of the company.
What do you? I don't understand. That's not what I said. You just made that assertion.
But we're saying there's a minimum wage. There's a minimum equity share that janitor would need to get.
well, are you talking about
We're
in
ta-
comparison to doing
We're talking about a
profit-sharing
socialist
model?
minimum wage.
Right. But comparing it to a model where employees are cut in on the profit is what you're saying. Comparing that, what we have
No.
now to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I would just point out that, well, so first of all, you had talked about it a lot earlier about like, well, what companies do that? There's a lot of examples of bigger firms that do this kind of thing.
Okay.
A great one is Southwest Airlines. Did you know that they have a massive employee profit sharing model?
How does it work? What's the details?
So it's a once a year payment, and they look at how they did the last year, and then a certain percentage of the profits they distribute as bonuses to all of the employees, and
That
it's
is-
it's fairly significant.
Dude, that's great. Like in a socialist country, how that's it? That's all you want? Because that's easy. I can, you know what I mean? Like what are you asking for when you're asking for socialism? Just a bonus fund based on profit? Because that's easy.
No, not necessarily, but I'm listen. I wasn't trying to make any assertion about that. I was just trying to give you an example of you were asking earlier, like what companies do that.
I think
here's
that's
a big
awesome.
one that does it.
I think that's awesome, and I'd even be in favor of regulating that. and saying, yo, you need to put aside like 5% or 10% or whatever, I don't care, of your profits to distribute evenly amongst your employees. Is that socialism?
No,
Is that
would
all
be,
it takes?
That would be some aspect of socialization, especially if it's like earned by the workers that have some level of collective
It
bargaining.
just seems so bureaucratic. I don't understand the workplace in
Bureaucracy
the world.
still is very much at the foundation of a bourgeois state as well. It's just that we
dude,
don't think
I'm
about
talking like this is bureaucracy on bureaucracy on bureaucracy.
it. No, I don't.
I don't
think it's any
understand
different.
your workplace.
I'll tell
Because
you
if
this
that's
much.
not good enough, then what is? I
Here.
don't understand.
There is, I think it's called People's Republic of Walmart. It's a really good book. And so like
The title.
there was a genuine problem in the USSR with how to deal with crops and agriculture. And central planning, unfortunately, had limitations at the time because we did not have the computational power. One of the, ironically, like steps in the right direction was actually coming from Chile, which then got their own 9/11 50 years ago, but we won't get into that because, you know, socialism bad. But there wasn't enough computational power to implement centralized planning at that time effectively, and it led to plenty of issues, right? So, ironically, nowadays we have centralized planning inside of Walmart, inside of Amazon, and these companies are generating a ton of revenue that they could cut their workers into. Maybe
How?
they would be much smaller. Maybe they would be much smaller.
What's the
in
minimum
size.
that would make it socialist? That's what I'm curious about.
I don't think there's like a exact dollar
What are you
value
talking
rather than
about?
because you're looking for an exact dollar value rather than I'm talking about an entirely different way of thinking.
But there's the law. There's a law in a socialist country that says you must do.
I'll
this.
give you one example. I'll give you a good example from
Yeah.
your life, right? Right now, you have Cam, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cam does wonderful goofs, gaffs, and Photoshop.
Splaps.
We love Cam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
No,
Let's give it up
that
for Cam.
nature.
Let's give it up
We
for Cam
love
real
Cam.
quick.
Yeah.
I love you guys. I love you guys.
So, technically, if you were interested in maximizing your revenue, what you could have done instead of hiring Cam was outsource it to Fiverr, or I don't know, get like some Filipino graphic design company. If you were one of those like TikTok guys out there who's like, I fired my entire workplace and like fucking hired everyone in Pakistan for 5 cents an hour. It's fucking sick. Like you could be one of those guys and do that. But the reason why you didn't do that is because you feel as though correctly that Cam yields better output. Hey! No,
Chewing?
she almost. I
Don't
caught
do
her.
it.
No,
You do it.
no.
Alfredo, you gotta enforce the law on her.
No.
Alfredo has no interest.
Fredo, you have a monopoly
Yeah.
on violence
Go.
in this,
What
in this
the
office.
dog? Sorry.
It's okay. A welcome.
Welcome to
A
Strap.
welcome break.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please continue how cool I am.
So you don't do that, and there should be restrictions on that. Certainly, like there should be restrictions on being able to do that, being able to just like completely outsource your workplace. Those restrictions can come in a capitalist country in the form of tariffs, which many do. Protectionist trade or protocols exist globally, with the exception of the United States of America, which has some protectionist policies. But others that, most protectionist policies still benefit the interests of capital rather than the working class there. And trade partnerships have created a structure where, like, labor has been outsourced overseas.
saying that the
Our manufacturing
economy's perfect in
capabilities
every
have been
single way,
completely outsourced.
but
These are very bad things that
say that
exist
individual things
exclusively
are
due to
not working correctly.
exclusively due to greed that you
And say we have
understand
to replace the
under capitalism
entire thing.
that needs to constantly be put in check.
Like such a
But a
broad
government that is
swing.
designed, a government that's full of rich people, that is interested in their own wealth and wealth accumulation, that has stock options and trades like Paul Pelosi, and has that gets jobs for their family members in Goldman Sachs like Ted Cruz, and many other examples, is never going to truly represent the interests of the working class, and is always going to put the interests of capital ahead of the interests of the working class. You will never be able to have a real democracy. That's the difference between a bourgeois democracy and a proletarian democracy. or a dictatorship of the proletariat, rather than a dictatorship of the capital owning class.
I just want to know how the socialist workplace works. It seems so nebulous when you talk about it.
Why is it? I don't think it's nebulous at all.
But there's gotta be. Okay,
I have a
maybe
living,
move
breathing,
on.
working
Right.
example of it that I've given you.
Literally.
I know, but like,
Just retreats into like
there's got to be like a
pre-recorded
constitution
talking points
that says
that use all
outlines,
sorts
or
of
I don't
words
know,
that
whatever
lets
the
them
fuck you want to write,
obfuscate
right? There's got to be
like,
something, and it says like,
the meaning of
or
what he's
rule
saying.
laws.
He just stops
It says, you know,
saying
this is the
anything
minimum that a person should get
after
from the company.
He gets on like a 10
Yes.
second rant.
And
It
what would
should be
that-
married to the
It'd be-
output. It should be married to the productive forces. It should be married to the output.
He's gonna
That
hide
should be
behind
pegged.
We talked
to-
about this enough, though. I don't
that
want to
should
bore
be
people.
pegged
and all this
to
other stuff.
the performance. And
Not
I think that
actually
that is the
saying-
best possible way to work.
I guess my problem on that is like, how could you possibly?
Enforce that.
No, not even enforce. How could you possibly even analyze that? Like, how much more? How
that's
much
where
more
we go.
money are we making because the janitor comes in?
That's where
clean?
we go to the Walmart example. That like we are already completely aware of that. We have, you know, we have actuaries, we have CPAs that are working in real time, making mathematical equations to
Okay.
figure out exactly what not to pay people technically. And they could be in a
What's the different
total
science of
social
paying people?
reorganization of the economy with a socialist dogma.
Okay. So
would
there's-
work in the opposite direction.
Okay.
It's kind of like this.
Please, let's move to another topic.
Okay,
I don't
well-
want to bore people.
Well, wealth was one aspect of this, right? Like, we already have property taxes, for example, in America, but we never make similar mathematical equations on capital gains, earnings that you make in the stock market. Wealth accumulation could work in the exact same way as property taxes, and yet we don't have any mathematicians working on that.
That's a good
front.
idea, but
and that's a great idea,
people
right?
probably do that in a lot of countries that aren't socialist.
Well, this is not just the distinction between socialism
But that's
and whatnot.
okay.
Because
It's the
there is,
entire point of
we
the
talked about
discussion. But I
theory.
think that's
We talked a
good.
lot about theory, but then we also have to talk about like what is possible, right? At least in the
That's true.
short term.
Not socialist.
And
Got
that
it.
is the reason why I always try to tell more rugged, more rigid, more
That's
passionate socialists
That's where I'm coming from,
to
though.
cooperate. I know, to cooperate with people that are also perceived as radicals in America. Like, there's a reason why Bernie Sanders, who has been a socialist his entire life, basically has only implemented, instituted, or advocated for social democratic reforms in the United States of America. That's it. That's the only. There's the only reason why he's done that is so that he can inspire the masses and create an opportunity where workers have more control over their own lives and develop autonomy and inevitably develop class consciousness, creating ample opportunity for, if you believe in that sort of thing, socialist revolution.
Right. But that would never happen if the people were happy with their conditions. I feel like that would not happen. But anyway, so let me ask you this, to peg this down even more. In a socialist workplace, socialized workplace, certain jobs are still going to get paid more than others, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I gotta
Bullshit.
dodge that. It's got a really
Yeah.
predictable timing.
So there's still going to be class. There'll be class, right? There'll be class distinctions in a socialist.
No, the class distinction is not on pay. That's a
No?
a liberal understanding. That's actually
You don't
why.
think people will be like, I see people like, you're the rich dude in the Porsche, and I'm the working class dude in the
Great
Toyota.
question. Great question.
You don't think people will see that?
So social hierarchies are inevitable. There will be different kinds of hierarchies. What you're talking about is
But-
perfectly valid. But the class distinction in a socialist economy is not is completely abolished, because the idea is
just
there will be
not
those who have
true.
and those who have not, is what you're saying, at least in the interim.
Everyone will have. But there'll be
everyone
people
will
that have more.
Exactly.
People who will have a lot more.
Yes, some people that want to have more will be
Will have
able
a
to
lot
have
more.
more, and even a lot more. Yes, this is why I
And they'll be
always.
part of a class, don't
This
you
is
think?
why I always talk about because they have no control over
I-
the lives of others in that regard.
I find this idea that like people in a socialist country who have a lot more, they're able to make a lot more money, somehow won't be influenced by power or influence or greed that somehow in this society
You're saying no
is
matter what
magically
happens,
dispelled.
it will turn into capitalism, is what you're saying.
I think
Like, there will be
well, these people are going to be
That's what you mean by
influencing the
a
system
concentration
to
of
benefit
power.
themselves.
Yes. The best way to stop that from happening is democracy. Democracy in the workplace, actual, like, we cannot even imagine. Mark Fisher once said, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. And he was right. This is capitalist realism, because we are having this argument within the boundaries and within the cultural understanding of like existing capitalism today. And the reality is, we have no way, you and I, as it stands, I have no way of like helping you try to imagine a world where like each individual worker has more autonomy and does not suffer from alienation in their workplace, which would offer them plenty of more educational opportunities, plenty more free time. I guess the example you can point to in terms of difference, different degrees of socialization would be a person doing contracted work at Uber, okay, to make ends meet in America, versus like a regular unionized factory worker in Germany. The level of autonomy that they have and the level of interest that they have and the level of engagement that they have in a workplace democracy or some form of it is drastically different than the contracted Uber employee. Their worldview is drastically different. Their democracy yields drastically different results as a consequence.
But let's be realistic. We're not going to spring into an alternate reality where capitalism doesn't dominate the world.
Which is why
we have to be realistic.
Which is why I always advocate
Which is
for.
part of why I'm saying.
No, but that's why I always advocate for. That is why I always advocate for, in the interim, social democratic reforms that will yield more opportunities for opportunities for workers to organize. Now, of course, you can prove you can.
I want to follow.
And say,
I want to follow this out a little further because I think it's interesting. So, in a socialist country, there's going to be people who make a lot more, and within a company, are they exploiting the workers? The CEO, the founder of a car company, he makes a lot more than the workers.
As long as it is democratically organized in the sense that like every single person is like, no, your productive output in this circumstance is significantly higher than us, then yeah, that would be.
And how do they
valid.
determine that?
How do you
through a democratic process.
They have like a vote for everybody in the company has equal ballot power.
Depending on like how long you've worked at the company and things of that nature. These are different formations at this point. Like this is, now we're getting into like how do we organize our workplace and like how much power do we give each individual vote in the workplace. Yes, they would have one vote, but ultimately what are the matters that they are tasked with voting on? And there's like even in unions, there's a structure, right? Like every single person does have a vote. The rank and file will always vote, but there's still a negotiations committee. There's still someone engaging in the contract negotiations. Let
me say this.
There's still elections being held inside of the union. Does that make sense?
It does. But here, does this make sense?
Yeah.
You're inside and I want to ask you, Dan, because I'm curious about your opinion. You're inside a big company. Let's just say they make cars. There's tons of employees there. The CEO, founder, he makes a lot more than the employees. Do you think that the leaders should make more than the workers, Dan?
Well, it just kind of depends on I mean, I think there's nuance there because I think it really depends on what the company looks like, how it operates. Should the CEO, who is on a day-to-day basis working and managing a company, make more money?
He works the same hours as the production people.
I mean, with more responsibility, I think should inherently come with some more privilege. However, I mean, now, are we talking about a CEO or are we talking about an owner? Because a lot of owners don't do shit.
No, I'm talking about someone who's working because the idea of ownership is probably different in a socialist.
Right, and the owners may be private or it may be a public company.
The CEO. So you agree he should make more. So let's
depends.
It just depends.
There's not room for nuance. There's just not.
What do you mean?
If
there's
you
not
if you're
room for
living in a
nuance?
socialist country, this shit needs to be like laid out. Like there's not room
But-
for
but just
nuance.
like-
where
but-
in every workplace
just like
we're going to
there is-
decide
Just
little
like there's
different rules
nuance
for everything.
under capitalism where you have the freedom to fucking
but there's
operate in
rules
that
like
regard.
minimum wage.
But with rules, exactly, you would have the similar structure pegged to like.
I'm trying to ask you guys what
pegged
the
to
rules, and I
worker
keep getting these
compensation,
nebulous
like a maximum
answers.
wage tied
But-
directly to your lowest paid
This
employee.
is what I wanted to say though. Let's say
Do you hear what I said?
I did.
Maximum wage tied to like there could be a situation where like a maximum wage could be implemented under a socialist structure to ensure that every single workplace has at least a maximum
I
wage that is
understand.
directly tied to the lowest paid worker and their full-blown compensations and benefits package that they
Okay,
get.
let's just go back to so the CEO, he earns more. He has more responsibility. Oh, Hassan, you said he's
I don't
make
agree
a
with
lot
that
more.
either. No. I don't agree with CEOs having more responsibility or should earn more for the record.
What? You just said
No.
that they should.
If you're
The
an
dude has the
owner
Porsche,
operator,
the
if
dude
you're
with
an
the
owner
Toyota.
operator and you're literally fucking, I was talking to Dan about this earlier before you got here, but it's like the difference between what you do and the difference between like let's say a jewelry designer is that a jewelry designer can outsource their fucking labor, but you are the main product here, which is why
Which
it's
is why
very
I'm
hard
using
for
a
you to see it.
different- I'm using a different example.
Yeah.
Like a
so if
auto.
you're a fucking jewelry designer and you are responsible for all the beautiful designs in your jewelry that's like super competitive, everybody loves it, everyone wants to buy your fucking jewelry,
Right.
you can still hire other people like designers to help benefit that process
and in this
make
perfect
better jewelry.
democratic workplace
Okay.
where everybody's altruistic,
Yes.
they vote to say the CEO should make more money than us.
Yes. Well, the way that works would be slowly but surely as you bring on more people into your company or as you expand and you grow, okay, in a democratic capacity, you are taking away the earnings that you have right now and eroding it because you're giving it to some people that are coming in because you think that they're valuable enough to be able to paid that way to be paid that way. But that process is being democratically voted on, and ultimately you know that you're doing that because you're in your understanding later down the line, if you care about this sort of thing, you're going to make even more money. Or rather,
money shouldn't be a motivator.
money should not be a motivator. You're right.
Why
Like,
does
in my situation,
why
it's
does
not.
the CEO care if his company makes more money? It's not. He's not going to make more money.
No, it's in the long term, you are creating more stability this way because you understand that every expansion of your productive output, okay, every single piece of expansion on your productive output yields better long-term stability and more money if that's what you're fucking motivated by. But ultimately, that's not the main motivator, and it should not be the main motivator
I
anyway.
think that's a horrible thing to say if you're considering socialism, that money's a motivator. That's like almost
I think
like
some
that's
people-
like almost like taboo. I feel like.
No, don't worry about what other people say in this situation or what you think people will perceive from what I'm saying.
Let me go back.
Because
there's a
that
point I wanted
part
to
is
make.
irrelevant.
Okay, so let's say in a world where the CEO makes more money,
In a world.
do you think it's a possible or even likely situation that the heads of these companies who make more money are going to want to influence the government and their workers to vote or support legislation that gives them more money or more influence? Is that a likely outcome?
Wait, can you ask that again? Sorry,
and
I
within
saw
a
a comment
huge
saying you were rectangular, and it fucked my brain up a little bit.
I think that I think that yes, and I think that speaks to what Hassan was saying. I think that's what it speaks to what Hassan was saying earlier about why a lot of Marxists have criticism of social democracy. That lack of elimination of the capitalist profit motive part of the economy
It doesn't.
will
socialism doesn't work.
naturally result in what you're
that's
saying.
my point. So thank you, Dan. In socialism, the money motive doesn't. It's literally it's not compatible. It doesn't work because you're going to have people at the top who are going to want more. They're going to want more influence. They're going to want more power. They're going to want more money, and they're going to exert their influence, their status. Even if they don't make more money, they have status.
Yeah,
For sure.
there's going to be
They're
some
going to
form of-
have.
there
They're going to
will
be able to influence.
Socialism
it.
is not egalitarian in
But
the
don't-
sense that there's
you see
like
what I'm saying, Dan, that
full-blown
there's a
equity.
problem here?
Socialism
So
does not.
Socialism only exists when you
Socialism-
remove the money motive, right? Dan?
Socialism, and in the way we understand socialism, yes, the money motive is.
But
Now
that-
we're talking
but
about.
that doesn't seem
now
like
we're talking about
something you want to
eroding
do.
it.
You don't want to remove the money motive.
Because I'm in the middle ground where I'm talking about like what's
'Cause you're a social
realistic.
democrat.
No, I'm not. I'm talking
Sounds
about.
like you are.
I'm talking about the realistic short-term period because I don't live in that. I don't live with that.
I
operational
agree that if we
basis
lived in a
myself.
listen, if I
But I
agree,
know
if
that
we
other people
live,
can't do that for
Dude,
the time being.
If we could just teleport into a utopian Star Trek world where money doesn't exist and everybody's equal, yeah, everybody would love that. But let's talk about real shit.
I am talking about real shit.
Well, that's
which is
what I'm
why,
try- that's
which
all
is
I'm
why
trying to do,
giving
too.
you, which is why I'm giving you an example of like the interim period of moving towards socialization or a socialist transitional
I
state.
agree with that.
But the problem is when I describe that, you say, well, that's not socialism. I'm like, yeah, I know. Money being a motivator
no.
for certain people.
I'm saying once you move to socialism, the system, in my opinion, falls apart. It doesn't work because it falls to the same trappings. Because people are going to want more power, they're going to want more influence. You're going to have capitalistic parties, thank you, Lena, that are going to want
Yes.
to influence. You're
And-
going to have these external forces that
those
want
who-
that freedom,
you're
that want
saying
that
there will
individualism.
always be, even in a democratic organization
And
in the
I believe
workplace,
the
there will
best
be
that
people
we
that make
can-
more, right? That's
I
what you're
believe
saying.
the best that we can do
Yeah.
is provide laws and regulations that guarantees people a fair, equitable life.
Let me ask you this.
Within those rules, I believe if you're operating within those rules, then you can do and make however much money as you want if you're operating the rules with a super progressive tax rate and everybody's provided for. Because if you want to move to a socialist system, I don't think that system actually works.
So the cultural differences differences that we see in countries that are still capitalist but social democratic versus countries like the United States of America that are hyper individualistic and have like very little social democracy is the argument that I'm making, is that with more social amenities and with higher degrees of socialization, people's attitude towards money and money making becomes drastically different.
Status
There are
is important,
different
though.
there are different motivators. Yes, status can be an important thing, but
That
that
can be-
social hierarchy, designed around status has nothing to do with the productive output and has nothing to do with like your material reality. It has the capacity to change like the way people perceive you. It's like an attractive person versus like someone who is maybe not as aesthetically pleasing, right? Those things are going to exist. Like there's always going to, socialism doesn't mean like LeBron James has to be the same fucking height as like, you know, like a 5-foot person to play basketball. There's going to be different earners. There's going to be, there's always going to be some level of competition.
okay.
This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. This is
Okay.
how you innovate.
If there's different levels of earners, do you agree that that seems to be incompatible with Marx's theory of socialism? Because if
No,
there-
no, it's absolutely not. Because all, and correct me if I'm wrong, Hassan, because you're more read on this than me, but all that is being said at the end of the day is that people are entitled to the value that they create. If somebody creates more value than somebody else, then they are entitled to more value.
the theory is wonderful.
Yes.
But
And the
I'm
idea-
we're talking about real shit, right? So when people make more, they're gonna want to influence. I'm not saying everybody, but again, this goes back to what I was saying last week. There's people who are pathological. Okay.
Yes, there's always bad faith
And
actors.
even in a socialist country, the sociopaths are probably going to float to the top just because they're willing to do everything that other people aren't, or they care about status and power where other people don't. And so these high-functioning, highly motivated sociopaths are going to want to influence government and business democracies to increase their power and influence.
Like they do now under a
Yes,
capitalist.
like they do
Right.
now.
Right.
And that's why I think it's not realistic to expect that not to happen. And I think the most realistic and the best way is in between. Because capitalism...
Can I counter what you said?
Hold on. Capitalism doesn't work. We know that. And I think socialism doesn't work for the same exact thing. Because people are going to want to... The psychopaths are going to want to move it. And I think the only realistic solution is in the middle, where you just create a sandbox that is good for everybody and operate within that sandbox, because everything else seems like a fantasy to me.
Every single thing that you've mentioned in both of these equations still revolve around human greed, turning humanity and the way people operate into capitalist little demons who are driven by profit. I do believe self-interest is a thing that happens. That's certainly true, which is why you have to have certain restrictions placed upon people that ensure that they don't get out of hand with the level of power that they have. The way I describe it is this. In America, people always say labor unions are corrupt. They're actually really bad. They have a rigid hierarchy, and they are also susceptible to nepotism. This much is true in certain labor unions. There's been a lot of reform in the Teamsters and the UAW. Shouts out to that. No, what do you mean? Historically, there absolutely has been. I don't
say that about.
Oh, no, I know you don't say that about unions. My point is this, though. The way I counter that always is this. There's always going to be corruption. There's always going to be, bureaucratic red tape. There's always going to be nepotism. But I would much rather, if corruption is inevitable, I would much rather have a more just and more equitable, a more democratic process that at the very least by its very design, like in the union structure, offers tangible benefits to the workplace, to the workers, rather than the corruption that we currently experience on a daily basis under the capitalist corruption.
That's the same thing I want.
Okay, which is why I said, you're not comfortable with socialism with capitalist character.
I also think that socialism, when you consider corruption and high-functioning sociopaths, there's a lot more risk when you centralize the power at the top. Let's say one party for a dictatorship or tyranny.
That I actually don't agree with at all. I think that the democratic process in and of itself, whether it's a multi-party system or a single-party system or a two-party system like we have that yields results exclusively, like the material changes that are made are done at the behest of corporations and the wealthy capital owners. No matter what, I think that a more democratic process is always going to be a better and more effective mechanism at fighting against centralized power and sociopaths that want to assume control. I think that if that is an inevitability, no matter what happens, I personally believe that more of a democratic process is going to be more effective. I'll give you an example.
I like democracy
DuPont
too.
Chemical. DuPont Chemical, under the capitalist, liberal, bourgeois democracy in the United States of America, was able to dump toxic waste into farmlands and destroy natural water supplies and delicate ecosystems. They still do it to this day. We have PFAS, the forever chemicals, right? That is everywhere. We have microplastics, all that good stuff, right? In a situation where, let's say, DuPont Chemicals was like at least democratically organized, the workers themselves have more power to say, what the fuck are we doing? You're destroying my fucking uncle's farm. You're destroying my backyard.
Right.
And that way they can put a stop to it, or at least demand changes to happen, rather than expect the government to turn around and be like, all right, we're the EPA. We just realized that we are going to...
so you want less government or more government? Because socialism is like all government.
No, that's not true, Ethan. Socialism is simply giving more power to the individual in that regard. You have a government that also
You're
exists.
telling people you do not have a choice. You cannot run your business this way. You cannot.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a stronger government than we have. That's a really
but I think you want a stronger
government.
government than we have. You want a stronger.
Well, I want a stronger government.
You want market
that
regulation.
Yeah, but it's even stronger than the one that I want. That says, here's your workplace. You must exist in it. So you're saying on one hand, the EPA is silly.
Well, the EPA.
But on the other hand,
DuPont, in the situation with DuPont, if you want me to finish this, because this is not a hypothetical, this is something that actually happened. EPA said, "Sorry, we're gutted. We don't have like enough researchers." A lot of the researchers that work at EPA also end up getting jobs at DuPont, or vice versa. There's always a revolving door, tit for tat. Regulatory capture is something that these corporations do in an effort to monopolize and also improve their profit margins, as always. So in that structure, the EPA basically delegated DuPont with figuring out how toxic their pollutants were. And of course, until a journalist uncovered this entire thing, they were able to claim that these toxic pollutants weren't as bad, right? So there is no mechanism in this situation where we just
capitalism.
Yeah, so we just sit there and we expect the government that that is, appointing people into positions of power that literally
expect the
have
people to do it?
material. No, listen. We expect the government to enforce certain regulations and restrictions that they do not, because the people that are placed into that position of power have no interest or need in placing said restrictions, or maybe even lack the know-how.
Maybe people in the
to do
company
that.
don't want to make less money.
So
maybe they don't have access to all the data that
Well,
the CEO
the beautiful
has.
part about that is that, at least historically speaking, what you're describing has never happened. What I mean by that is, when you look at the UAW, for example, it is supposed to be in their best interest to be anti-EV, and yet for some reason Sean Fain and the UAW's perfectly understanding of a
Well,
Green
there's
New
also
Deal
never been a
and pushing
company
for
that
that.
has a purely socialistic hierarchy where they
That's
make
not true.
less.
There's cooperative
where
corporations.
people where they make less.
Like Mondragon is a good example of.
And have they been levied with the task of deciding to make less money to help the environment?
Yes.
When?
Absolutely. Not
And a purely
not
socialist
not
company?
to help the economy, but they.
My point is that saying one is better than the other is just theory.
Well, we are talking about simply theory,
I think
because
a
we
strong
both agree that
EPA
capitalism doesn't work.
I think a strong EPA is great. In fact, I think you'd still need an EPA in a socialist country. I don't think it eliminates the need for the EPA.
Agreed, 100%. Which is what I was saying is, in that socialist formation, there is actual, real mechanisms of control that can put a stop to this kind of thing, rather than power accumulating in the hands of the few at the top of the corporate structure that then make these decisions, make these hiring practices,
in theory,
to get these
it's
people
great.
in the revolving door.
In theory, what
I
you're
think
saying
in,
is
in
great.
practice it would be great as well.
I think
We
in
are
practice it'd be
seeing-
great, but I don't think it's possible.
But okay, so now
So let's go back to this idea of greed,
first
right?
you said
'Cause you're
first you
saying-
said the theory doesn't work. Now you're saying in practice it won't work.
No, because it's not. And what I mean is that you can't organize it that way. It won't work. And you know what I mean.
But we
what
are
I mean
seeing
is
it.
that
we do see different. You and I are in agreement that higher degrees of socialization is a benefit. Okay, we're in agreement. You like unions. You want workers to have more control. You want workers to have more power, more say, and have more autonomy ultimately.
Yes.
So you and I are absolutely in agreement on that front. So to say that doesn't work in theory, I think betrays.
I'm talking about the workplace specifically.
Well, yeah, in the workplace as well. You're in agreement, no?
That's a huge difference.
We spend 80% of our adult lives in the workplace. This is the most important
And I
place
believe
for
it should be
political
regulated.
organization.
Listen, we seem to have a disagreement about like greed. Like there seems to be this notion that people that live in a capitalist country, we understand greed and desire for wealth differently than an example I always see is like Native Americans, and that's part of why I can't conceive of a true socialistic country.
You're saying that primitive communism or primitive accumulation, which has been the foundation of like societal development for much longer than the Industrial Revolution or post-industrial revolution capitalism, right?
I've seen a lot of people say that greed is learned. That if you grew up in a pure socialist society,
No,
they wouldn't
absolutely. Self-interest is a real thing that people have, but people can be taught, and people can learn that the collective aspects of societal development are far more important for self-interest than the individual, the hyper-individualistic, like, I'm going to get mine, fuck everybody else.
So the point of going to this greed discussion is to talk about like human nature, and that I believe that in a perfect socialist society, there'll be forces of influence of wealthy people with status, people with power, wanting it more for themselves.
Mm-hmm. My argument always
and I believe that that's that's innate.
Yeah. If so, first of all, I don't think that there's a biological imperative. I think that, like I said,
what's the difference?
Self-interest can be.
What's
if you have a
resource hoarding and greed?
Yes. So
how is accumulating lots of money different than resource gathering or accumulation?
I will describe it to you. A society that heightens collectivist understandings, okay, as a consequence of it being directly tied to our at this point, our means of production and how we understand it, how we generate commodities, is going to have the exact opposite opinion on collectivism versus hyper-individualism in the way that you see it under capitalism. More people will have a collective understanding that like we are in this together and that we're working side by side.
Most, not all.
Then yes, you're right. And the reality is that there will still be people who are self-interested, people who will still want to utilize the existing constructs, the existing hierarchies to their immediate advantage at the cost of others. But my point is that if that is an inevitability, which I agree, because there will be people who are sociopathic, criminals, charlatans, the lumpen pros and whatnot, okay? That will always exist, but even if that exists in the and I'm being very realistic about this, wouldn't it be better to have more mechanisms of control in the form of democracy and ensure a world in which everyone has more autonomy in a place where they spend 80% of their lives on?
It would be.
So yeah, then we are in agreement.
There's a rubber band. You know, it's pulling us. The center of gravity is social democracy. Capitalism, socialism, and the rubber band's pulling us in both directions towards the center. That's what I believe.
Okay. And my point always is that while marginal incremental reform in social democracies were made when there was actually a counterforce in the form of communists, trade unionists, anarchists, and the like, okay, they have been thoroughly eviscerated both in this country and in Europe as well, which is precisely the reason why you see Europe following the American attitude with its own conditions getting worse and worse year over year.
If you're willing to at least acknowledge that there are going to be innately, just as a product of the human condition, people that are born greedy with a desire to want to hoard resources. I don't know why you're afraid to say greedy. They're hoarding resources. If you're willing to admit that they're going to be bad people, then that's okay for me, because there was some takes I saw that pretended like that.
Don't have a conversation with people on Reddit who also themselves will probably change their ideas. There's people are very rigid, especially under the guise of anonymity online. It's not reflective of the actual conversation that you could be having that's productive.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
But
So let's move on.
I fall into this trap too. I yell at fucking people in my chat all the time because I sometimes lose sight of like sarcasm and I can't get an accurate assessment because I don't know where you're coming from.
Really bad.
Okay.
But I want to continue this.
If you go to pee, I'm fucking everyone's a communist after this. I'm just letting you know.
It's okay. You can have
While you're peeing, I'm just gonna
Maybe we should both go so you don't get the advantage.
No, I'm gonna get the advantage.
You don't need to pee? You always pee before me.
No, I'm holding it in. No, I don't need to pee.
There's no shot you don't need to pee.
Yeah.
I'm not taking a pause.
Oh God.
No, do not.
You want me to mute his mic?
That's fucked up. I'm reading the comment.
Nope, I have control.
There you go.
I
think this has been a relatively productive conversation. I mean, God knows what people will do to pick this apart, because every single time we have conversations, it's very frustrating that like there is a secondary market, like a cottage industry of people who will like pick apart every detail and make these like grand assertions off of it, which is very frustrating because it's like I guess if you're from one of these communities out there, and there's plenty of them, there's so many people that make videos, right?
I mean, hell, we do
like,
it. I'm not going to say that the H3
duped?
podcast is.
What?
I mean, I would say the H3 podcast. We do that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we do that as well. Yes, I do that as well. But like, my question always is like, if you're coming from one of these communities, like, don't you feel like you're duped a little bit by whoever you trusted into believing that there is like genuine discord and division here? Like,
talking about you and Ethan having a falling out,
or even people didn't attack you as much. Surprisingly, it was more so me, even though you and him had a big disagreement as far as
well, nobody gives a shit about me. I mean, come on.
It was odd. I don't know.
Thank you, AB.
Because you have a lot of differing opinions as well, but for some reason you weren't getting criticized as much. It's almost like people are more self-interested in certain directions. But
I think there's definitely an element of that. People definitely have it out for you. And also, I think I saved myself a little bit by being at the beginning, I don't know if you caught how much of that conversation you caught, but I was very reluctant to engage in that conversation. And so, anything that I said was kind of tinged with the fact that like Dan doesn't even really want to be here. So I guess maybe that softened people's anger. I'm sure people did get angry about it, but frankly, I was stressed about it afterwards just because like, I don't know. I don't like being the center of attention. And so I stayed off of social media all weekend. I just didn't look at it.
Yeah,
Ethan just said they were glazing me up. Well, I'm sure some people were, but
yeah, they were saying Queen Dan, Wan. They were saying Wan. Yeah.
Maybe I'll take this as an opportunity to drop a little bit of knowledge I don't think I've ever actually shared on the show. But my one side of my family was actually I am descended from a bunch of like hardcore Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution.
I knew it.
Fuck, dude, that's you. That's
I
right.
fucking
We were actually trying to draw this out of you, dude. You're fucking done,
God
son.
damn it.
My last name, Sverdlov, is a bastardization of Sverdlov, who was one of Lenin's like lieutenants in
You don't
the
want me to
revolution.
button this out? You sure you want this to go out?
So, I mean,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We're talking like
Damn,
great.
dude.
We're talking like great uncle or something here.
knew it.
It's
I just
not really
like
directly
your
connected.
your family's proletarian violence and his contributions have been noted, man. Yeah. We're Czarists here. How dare you?
sorry. I didn't want to piss off the whites.
So I know. I always see this picture and I'm always like, dude, he seems a little too comfortable in that outfit.
But like
he's just filling that uniform.
It was a Halloween
little too
costume. It was a
natural.
Halloween costume. I'm not a weirdo. Thank you. Okay?
Red scare? Red scare?
Yeah.
Red scare?
Red scare.
Okay, so I want to move on to some more practical topics. But before we do that, I want to say this. I think this is a great conversation.
I agree.
And anyone that's mad, you're wrong. Anyone who's upset right now about this conversation, you're wrong. This is a good conversation we're having.
People get heated, but
so.
I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and I think a lot of people have found this really interesting.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
The last time was a little jading, but I wasn't going to stop me. But anyway, also I want to emphasize that we agree on so much, like literally 95%.
In the
And I just
practical
don't-
application, in the short term, we are in agreement 100% of the way. If
Yeah.
you like Bernie Sanders, then you're good with me. That's my opinion. Because Americans do not have any class consciousness, and you have to build that. There are certainly differing opinions, like people who believe in accelerationism or whatever, but I truly think that America will only accelerate towards barbarism as it has, and not necessarily socialism, without any kind of without people believing that like they have any kind of autonomy in the workplace, any kind of means of collective bargaining in the workplace.
Okay, so anyway, my point is, if you're angry, you're being silly right now. This is good. This is a good conversation. And on my part, again, I'm pretty, ignorant. So this is good for me to kind of.
I think you
suss
undersell
out
yourself. I think you are, more importantly than anyone else, ignorance is one thing, but you're very curious and you're charitable when you want to learn things. And I think that is truly important, as opposed to being like, I've made up my mind, this is good. I mean, obviously there's still hang-ups.
Yeah.
But that's always going to happen. It's just, this kind of dogma is too powerful. Everyone has their own journey.
The fact that we have like over 30,000 people watching like a really analytical,
Kind of nuanced debate about this.
Yeah, socialism and social democracy is pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm happy to see that. And like Hassan said earlier, I mean, I think there's been a massive sea change in this country in the last decade, largely thanks to Bernie Sanders. But I would even go further back and say like the Occupy stuff and the financial crisis is when it really started to creep into the consciousness. But I can't imagine having this conversation when I was like a teenager. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like it would be a non-starter in this country. And
well, we're both radical, by the way, as we're saying.
Yes, yourself in the eyes of the broader American
Even
public
now, I would be considered radical by
compared to
almost
someone
everybody.
like myself.
Yeah.
Yes, people will go, "Oh, he seems reasonable," which I personally love. I think that's a fucking great thing.
I don't think
because
they'd
the
say
more
that. That'd
insane
be
I
good,
look, the more sane you look. And in the short term, what you're advocating for is unironically a good thing,
Rob,
which is why I also.
You look crazy for once. I look sane for once.
No, but that's my point. Is that's why I also.
We're working in the same.
That's why I also
common.
try to engage in movement building in the other direction as well. Whenever there's like. Because there's plenty of people who fucking hate me on to the left of me who have like radical, Maoist third worldist opinions or whatever the fuck. But I never give that any kind of light or any kind of attention or dunk on it because I feel like, yeah, they look crazy or whatever. Who gives a shit? Ultimately, if they are working in their own way to erode the power that capital has, then you're good in my book. And that even extends to social democrats to the right of me as well.
So just to summarize my point before we move on. It's essentially this. I believe social democracy can address all the issues that socialism attempts to address and also offers a more realistic and a proposition for an organization of society. That's it. But let's move on.
It is a 12:20. I should just point out. I don't know how much
going,
we've been going for about 2 hours here.
If you need to bail, that's fine. But I have more questions.
Okay, what do you have? I'm down to
All right.
keep talking.
Can I just point this out real quick? You sent this a moment ago.
Yeah, my dad got.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Every time.
Every time.
Every
That is so
time.
funny.
One of my
Yeah,
parents.
to be fair, Perdukatons has gotten me as well in the
Right,
past.
yeah, But this was my parents. Every time we do a clickbait title, they go, "Dan left. AB died.
AB's dead?
AB's dead."
What?
Yes.
And in the role of a lifetime, Gary.
All right, let's talk about some like realistic or not realistic. Let's talk about some actual applications of socialism today, because I kind of want to understand it. So let's look at China.
That's not bad.
So I know China's done a lot of good for the massive amount of its populace. They uplifted them out of poverty. They gave them access to health and housing, and on the whole, the
improved literacy rates.
Yeah, everything across
rapid
the board.
urbanization, rapid development.
Exactly. The quality of life of the average Chinese person is absolutely catastrophically improved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now you tell me when I ask you, is
Seems pretty radical for you to even admit that, in my opinion. But okay.
Well, hold on. I've never denied that.
Okay.
But my question is, is China socialist or not? Because you always say China isn't a socialist country.
I think China, if you ask them, is a transitional socialist state. Do I think that it has certain socialist characteristics?
Who
Absolutely.
would say that in China?
What do you mean?
You said if you ask them.
The CCP.
The government. The CCP.
Oh, okay.
That's like their main thing, is that this is like
They say we're
socialism
transitional?
with Chinese characteristics. We are a transitional socialist state. Every communist party will always say that they are trying to implement a transitional socialist state. Obviously, that socialism has to be adjusted to the material conditions and the needs that the people have. So socialism can.
Last week you were telling me China isn't a socialist country, so I was curious what you meant by that.
It's not socialism in the sense that like there is collective ownership over the means of production across the board. It's state ownership that benefits the interests of the citizens, as you've also admitted or recognized.
It's not an admission. I recognize
Well, it's
that.
an admission if you're living in the Western world, because in the Western world,
It's
everybody.
undeniable. It's just a fact.
Yeah, but people
they're
will
still
use. Here comes the.
I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people.
You know.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Socialism.
Well, okay.
Do you
so
want-
here-
do you want
here's what I'll
clarity
say
on my
about
Taiwan,
Here's what I'll
statements?
Hold on, we'll get to that.
Before we get to okay.
Here's what I'll say about China. China's economy was extremely stagnant for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you compare it to Taiwan, who separated from them in about 1950s, if you compare...
Well, more to that separation, I think.
Sorry?
There's a little bit more to that separation, I think.
Well, we'll get into more depth in that. But my point is, around the 1970s, 1980s is when China's economy started to boom.
Yes.
And the reason for that boom was because they started to open up their economy and lean into more capitalistic notions.
They got
that
an
is the
influx of foreign capital.
and,
Yes.
and that is when the average quality of life of the average Chinese person was vastly improved.
So here-
and before that, the Chinese economy was extremely stagnant, and the quality of life was not good.
Yeah, so here's how that works, right? There is plenty of trade that occurs with other countries as well that do not have a mandate of trying to do even development, right? Let's not use the word socialism here. Let's just say urbanization, even development, like uplifting. Chinese people will say Chinese prosperity, right? Plenty of other countries that get foreign capital do not necessarily develop in that direction in the same way that China did. The reason why China was able to do so is not necessarily because foreign capital came into the country. It was because of what they did with said foreign capital. If China had developed in a similar structure with, like, you know, Western-backed kleptocrats that control it like an oligarchy in the same way of the democratized market and the dissolution of the USSR did, then China would objectively be in a similar situation to Russia and the Russian economy in general. Russia made all of its, or the USSR made all of its collectivization in that time frame, in a very short time frame, without 400 years of like slavery and all of the many benefits that gave to the Western world, and went from fucking potato farmers to people that beat the United States to the space, to be the first person to go to space. Yuri Gagarin shouts out. Similar structure existed, and similar thing happened in China as well after foreign capital came in. But it wasn't necessarily because foreign capital came in, it was what they did with that foreign capital. Does that make sense? So in that situation, because money is just money, right? If there was like, I don't know, if we lived in a very different
what
world.
Was the money for? It was for cheap labor.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, in a sense, they're serving capitalism. They're taking the money.
It was
serving capitalism.
The Genghis Gambit is that
Genghis Gambit.
It's just like utilizing the
Deng was the leader that
interests
did
of,
Oh, that was his name, Dingus?
No,
Deng.
Dingus.
Is that you can take advantage of Western society has this division of power where there's an imbalance there, where capital owners and their capital interests are better represented by their bourgeois government. So they will, if we offer them, you know, cheap manufacturing, and then take their IP and start slowly but surely developing our country through rapid urbanization, like taking all that foreign capital and like building roads, building hospitals, building trains, and whatnot, we will be able to inevitably improve our material conditions as a collective.
In doing so, they've also entrenched themselves in a capitalistic model, I think. And not totally, right? But to an extent. And I think to that extent, it was a great benefit to them to operate in that middle ground. And I'll say this, since that's happened, you know, that's when you started seeing all these Chinese billionaires, which is not a good thing, I'm saying. But
Because
like
it's
you,
but it's global capitalism.
that's the inevitability.
It's impossible to escape global capitalism under a global capitalistic structure unless you are forced to exist or operate outside of those boundaries in the form of like Cuba, for example.
Well, we both agree on a realistic approach. So in that sense, we agree that's why I believe social democracy is the way. But, you know...
AB wrote something if you want to read it.
Fair question.
Oh, yeah. We were saying about
should read
how
it
the
instead of me.
CCP... I didn't see the second part. Since established in 1921, CCP has proclaimed itself to be a Marxist-Leninist party and has consistently referred to its system as socialism with Chinese characteristics. In essence, CCP views itself as overseeing a transitional socialist state working towards the eventual realization of communism. Because communism is a bit different. It's not like when you have like a strong central leader.
No, communism is when after a successful stage of development in a transitional socialist state, where the scarcity problem has been solved, and there is no interest in like capital accumulation, and the state eventually withers away, yielding a borderless, moneyless, stateless society.
It's the Star Trek future you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I'm sure
but not
China's well
entirely,
away.
because there's definitely
Critics
still a
often
state
point
in
to the
Star
gap
Trek,
between the party's rhetoric and the realities of it, noting the prominence of capitalistic practices, the wealth gap, and the absence of political freedoms as challenges to their characterization as a transitional socialist state. But isn't that just like, okay, but we kind of agree on that. So let me ask you this. One of the reasons that China is able to govern so effectively, and we agree they get shit done fast.
Yeah.
And that's how part of, again, how their economic growth was so so quick and strong.
Yeah.
They can act. They don't have to be bogged down by Congress and shit.
Can I cut in here really quickly? That's a dangerous prospect that capitalist countries are also reckoning with, for the record. And under a capitalist country, if they want to continue consistently competing with China, for example, one of the things that the EU did recently was talk about the government-backed subsidies in the form of EVs and how Chinese development is impossible to compete with because they're offering insane subsidies that offer Chinese EVs and is like basically destroying the EV marketplace for European car manufacturers. So they want to create an investigative team and stop that from happening somehow, or possibly even implement tariffs.
By the
Now,
way,
that in and of itself makes the Chinese centralized planning structure significantly better than capitalist ones in the form of global trade. That will create, in my opinion, a very scary future for Western liberal democracies, where how do you implement that kind of central planning, which already exists, but how do you make it worse? Fascism.
okay.
And
Well-
that's what I'm genuinely afraid of.
Well, I mean,
Barbarism.
China's not that far off from it in its current state.
What do you mean?
With like, I mean, they have basically a all-powerful leader. Everything's owned by the government. The only difference is they're not at war.
Yeah.
Basically, that's the only missing factor.
Yeah,
They
well-
are building their military
Yeah.
and threatening countries like Taiwan. So they're pretty close to fascism right now, I would say.
They're building their military
Government
but
rules
what they've
culture,
done, but what they've done with
business.
that military is very different than what the American military is.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
whatever.
They don't have 800
they have a
bases.
large military and they're threatening.
It's always a
people with it.
hypothetical. And
I'm
it's the
just
same
saying,
with
China's not that far from fascism.
It's the same with.
It's like
if
right
China's
there.
not that far from fascism. America is literally 10x the Nazi Germany fascism. Though
I
you have to
disagree.
admit.
China's closer because they have
What?
they have
you
the
said
one.
they built a military, but they haven't even
That's not
fucking
the only
used
thing
it.
I said. They have a government control of business, manufacturing,
Okay.
of social life, of the press.
Fascism. I don't
Okay?
know.
Okay.
They have one strong
These are
leader,
authoritarian. Yes, these are authoritarian constructs for sure.
and then
But
the only
fascism has
thing
a-
missing from that is basically they have strong nationalism.
I agree with that,
And they have
yes.
and the only difference basically now to go full fascist is if they were invading countries, which they're threatening to do
yes.
right now.
So on that same metric, you realize that the only difference in America is the simple feeling that you are free and that you have all manner of different freedoms. Whereas
We do have freedoms of expression.
We have freedom to say-
we have
yeah.
freedom of
I agree.
religion. We have
Yes.
freedom of assembly. Those are big deals.
But
I know you don't
material-
think you don't want to.
No,
those,
no, no.
Those
This
are
is a huge
those are
deal.
Big deals. Yeah.
Of course, it's a.
Okay.
Of course,
sorry.
it's something
I don't want to put words in your
No,
mouth.
of course, it's
I'll
something
take
I
that back.
willingly recognize.
Yeah,
Which
I'll
is why I
take that
say,
back.
like, I'm not living in fucking China right now. It's not like there's.
I don't
It's not
think
like they're on tier one
fair
cities.
to say, well, oh, America is.
Yeah.
And I'm not being an American simp. I'm just saying that
so I can upgrade my
The
you
idea
brought
that,
up
like-
American fascism, like China fascism is better than
Okay,
American
here's
fascism.
the difference, because fascism, okay,
Why?
fascism is supposed to be a
Why?
means of control with a oftentimes capitalist understanding of the economy to and effectively to organize the economy and
Capitalism.
continue
I don't
organizing
think
the economy.
Capitalism doesn't have a lot to do with fascism. I don't think.
Capitalism has everything to do with fascism.
I mean,
Capitalism.
You're striking on one of the biggest political philosophy debates of the 20th century.
Fascism
Okay, so-
is restoring
Right.
order by
I don't
you
think.
know
Yeah,
whipping the fucking masses.
A lot of people define
but that-
fascism as capitalism in crisis.
Yes.
So I think about it more about like, yeah, maybe it's like capitalism gone fucking totally off the rails. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
it's just
fascism.
no
if
ethical. they have
fascism had
no
nothing to
ethical
do with
hang-up.
capitalism, then all of these supposedly
But
populist
they're
leaders
getting
like
money
Hitler
to
and
do war.
Mussolini, who
That's-
started
we
off
have
as like
different words
supposedly
for
quote unquote
fascism
socialists, or
and
even like
capitalism.
interested
again, I don't
in
even think
higher
that
levels
they're
of
using these
socialization,
words right.
would not have worked alongside capital owners and
They-
destroyed
Talking
trade
about
unions and communists in general. Those were the first people that they fucking butchered.
Okay, fine. I don't care about capitalism. I mean, I'm a social democrat. So, or in terms of like how fashion, I just saying,
mean, if
I
we're
don't
gonna
think.
talk about social democrats in Germany. There's
I don't
also
think-
contention there, but
I don't think Chinese fascism is better or worse than
Chinese
American
fascism.
fascism. Why is that funny?
because I don't think that I do not think that China is fascist. I think that they are
Closer,
authoritarian.
close.
I don't think China is closer to fascism than America.
I mean, not
because
yeah,
because the
fascism isn't the
hypothetical,
only
because the most
authoritarian,
significant
right?
part,
But like,
the most significant part that you're mentioning is like, oh, they're building their military and they don't have freedom of
own the
assembly or
press.
freedom of speech. Well,
they control the culture.
yes, this part
They
this
own
part is
all
correct.
the manufacturing.
Nationalism is the best part that you can actually
They are
identify
nationalistic.
in the problems with China. You can absolutely push that.
I don't see where
push
I'm
that
missing.
part where it is nationalistic. Okay, however, the Chinese development and Chinese military action is either irredentist in nature, which is different than imperialism, where it's like it's more so expansive in its own limited area, rather than global imperialism, which is
China's
done with the
always taken
express
more
effort
lands.
with the
Tibet, Taiwan, they're always
okay.
expanding.
Well, if
Now,
we're going to
the
talk about
fact- the
Tibet,
fact that
if we're going to
you-
talk about Tibet
the
and
fact that
Taiwan,
you think it's
want me to-
like okay because it's their territory seems.
do you
a
want me
little
to?
bit
Do you
silly.
want? No. Do you want me to describe
No,
it?
I don't want to get into the Taiwan thing because
Well,
I don't
you
want
can't
to
just
get
say
to.
Tibet and Taiwan and then not expect me to explain the nuances.
I'm not ready for this tangent.
Because okay, Ethan, but like
Go
Tibet
ahead, go
is,
ahead.
Tibet was literally a fucking feudal slave mandate, like
So China
autonomous zone.
China did them a favor.
That was one. I mean, in America, when I say something like this, people get very upset. You know, we talk about the Dalai Lama saying "suck my tongue" or whatever, but like that's not far from the norm in fucking normal Tibetan
No.
existence before the Communist Party came in and
So
took
China
over.
Locked in.
unilaterally took over Tibet,
Like
wealth
these are.
their culture. They basically are trying to, homogenize the culture.
If your culture,
They're trying to spoil the religion and the identity.
the part of
and they did them
feudal
a favor.
warlords and slavery, abolishing that, yes, I do think that is good.
No, China did them a favor.
I think that yes, I will
Doesn't
be
matter.
on the record
Just
to
like
state
America did it.
that
Nah, I'm
while
not
the
gonna say
Chinese
it.
government, wait,
I'm not going to say it.
well, there is no equivalent in American intervention that you can point to in a similar capacity, unless you're talking about.
Okay, so
and I think this is a good way to describe Taiwan as well. The American federal government going into the fucking South and killing, unfortunately not all of them, but a decent amount of slavers and defenders of slavery. This is violent retribution from a powerful federal government
Hold on. Tibet was a separate thing.
squashed, okay?
Tibet is the South in the Civil War.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Tibet in the time frame where Chinese intervention happened would be the South. Yes,
So
they
what
were
was
doing
the,
slavery.
What was
they
the
were
moral
feudal.
aspect of the
Doing
war of
slaveries.
China?
They were doing them as
The
slavery.
interests are obviously like national security or whatever the fuck they claim,
That doesn't seem-
but ultimately the reality was that beyond the material benefits, that yes, they were a feudal, oppressive, slavery-backed state, autonomous region.
Mm-hmm.
So
Just like Russia's denazifying Ukraine.
no, I don't agree with that. For the record, I don't think that Russia is denazifying Ukraine. If anything, they will end up Nazifying Ukraine in the long run.
If you want to point to a modern country that you could probably fairly characterize as fascist, I would point to Russia before
I
point to
agree,
China.
100%. I think that Russia is a significantly better example of a fascist nation state,
Yeah.
given its modern Russia, contemporary Russia, being a capitalist nation state built by oligarchs
That's like
that
on
were
access.
anti-Soviet and anti-communist, that made deals with Western bankers and Westerners originally, leading up to the dissolution of the USSR, so they could literally pick apart the entire country. Vladimir Putin being another primary example of this.
Okay, good. They're fascists.
I would agree that Russia's interests are significantly more fascist than the outcomes are, because their interests do not lie around improving their productive forces or the abolition of like what Russia's doing in Ukraine is no different than what America has done in Iraq. Like, oh, we're bringing democracy. Like, they're not denazifying Ukraine. It's fucking bullshit. Whereas I will not say the same thing about like
Well,
Tibet. Like,
no,
I
I'm
can't,
not saying
I
one's
think it
better
would be a
than the other,
disservice. I think it'd be a
because all-
disservice to Ukraine to make a
I'm not.
comparison between like modern
I'm just
Ukraine
saying
and
that
feudal
there's
Tibet.
you can create a pretense to take anything you want.
Yeah, but there are
That's
also.
true.
But you agree, like for example, the federal government in the Civil War did the right thing, right? It was very violent, but they did the right thing.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's talk about Taiwan then, because Taiwan in its formation is created by the KMT, or KMT General Chiang Kai-shek. I'm butchering his name.
I think that was close.
But I think it's the closest I can get to that. And in its formation, it was a military dictatorship that was fascist, openly nationalist, and there was no surprise there that the American government was backing them, right? In its entire inception.
I'll
Taiwan
admit, I don't
now
know
is
a
very
lot
different
about-
than that.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about
But
it.
this is very important in the
Taiwan
context of
now,
like talking about Taiwan.
Should they be invaded for how they were
Absolutely
founded?
not.
Right.
Absolutely not. Because hey, guess what?
Everybody was
when
founded on shaky
America
ground.
builds you up to be a nation as a counterbalance or as the real China, as we did originally. That's why we were in support of Taiwan, because they were nationalist, fascist, military dictatorship that was brutal, comprised of dudes that got owned by fucking Mao. Overall, right? At a
Butthurt
time when,
losers.
and at a time when, yeah, 100%. At a time, and they were butthurt losers that believed that like Mongolia is also a part of Republic of China. They have more expansive desires, more expansive territorial
They ever
desires than
attacked Mongolia?
then that well,
they
they can't
invade?
do anything.
Well,
their
yeah.
their military,
Who cares?
according to American generals' assessments, was fucking dog shit.
I think Taiwan's a better example then.
So Taiwan.
But wait, I'm not ready.
But Taiwan in its
this
inception.
tangent is out of control.
Wait, but like you want me to?
We'll go back to it.
These things don't happen overnight. If you assume that it's like a war between good and bad, or that it happened overnight, it materialized out of nothing, then yes, that is infinitely more susceptible to Western framing, to be like, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, they want to do this thing, and then you make comparisons to like reasonable wars or whatever, and then all of a sudden, we are not factoring in the understandable, whether I agree with it or not, doesn't matter, the understandable desires of national security from the Chinese nation state that is in an openly contentious yet still very favorable trade relationship with the Western world. Why the fuck would they want a American military base in a nation state that was developed by America, originally a fascist, nationalistic, brutal military dictatorship? Why would they want that to be an American base 1 mile off their fucking coastline?
Okay, you're right.
So that is precisely the reason. So that's precisely the reason why the people of Taiwan who recognize that reality, while they yearn for independence, they recognize that reality that it will never happen as long as China has a military or a powerful economy, and as long as America has a legitimate interest in Taiwan being an American base of support to inevitably control China, dominate China in some ways.
Okay, hold on. Let me go back, because we did like the monster tangent here.
Okay.
I was saying one of the reasons China's so effective is because of their one-party state. Without opposition, they're able to move fast and effectively. So, do you think this is a good model? Do you think the one-party state is a good model? Because the outcome of that one-party state is also massive human rights violations across the board.
I mean, I don't think that. I think that America is a one-party state.
I don't care about America.
No, but it's important to understand, because like the one-party state is an inevitability under any kind of formation of the government. The government is going to yield results that are either positive for the people or negative for the people.
Even if
Some
it's
of the
marginal, there
social
is still a difference. Even if it's marginal, there's still a difference. For example, abortion, which I consider a human right. It's marginal.
I agree
but
with
there's a
you
difference.
on that. I think that it.
But I don't want to
yields-
talk about America. I want to talk about China.
Well, the reason why we're talking about America is to put it into a framework that is understandable. Like, that's the only reason why I always bring up. People always say, Hassan, your only assessment on the situation is America bad. It's significantly more nuanced than that. The reason why I always go back to America is to help Americans or Westerners understand Chinese governance and
I
how
understand
it's
what you're
not
saying.
all that different.
You say they don't just pretend to have two parties.
Yeah.
Now, I disagree with that. I don't think it's like super wrong. I think there are marginal differences in the parties. And I do think there's space potentially, although it's super unlikely. It's happened in American history for a third party. It's probably never going to happen again, but it has happened before.
Yeah, the Civil War.
And so, but like the consequence of
the greatest
hold on.
material differences. Okay, but the greatest material differences were ever
I shouldn't do
represented in
that.
American history was during the Civil War.
I take back the
Okay. The greatest material differences, like genuine material differences in the form of how to produce cheap commodities like cotton, okay, Well, in the northern states,
it's not.
they
Look at
backed
that.
the abolition of slavery. Southern states didn't. That was a major point of contention. That was probably one of the last times where there was like a real and significant difference in an agreement, I guess, a difference in opinion that led to a very violent conquest of the South that wanted to secede and was forced to not.
The one-party system in China does result in a lot of human rights violations. Does the ends justify the means in that case?
I don't think
The
so.
control.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
I think that in Cuba, which also has certain restrictions on civil liberties, for example, there is a better argument to be made that the ends justify the means in Cuba, because Cuba is an island that has been under embargo, and since its inception, since the Cuban Revolution, after we backed Batista and wanted to ensure that Cuba was still a tourism destination and sugar plantations with slavery, and then lost. We immediately said, okay, fuck this shit. Cuba, we are going to do everything in our power to stop you from developing. In that situation, because it's a tiny island nation that is in the ass cheeks of the largest imperialist superpower on the planet, it's understandable to have certain restrictions on civil liberties, and by the way, ironically, Cuba is like way better on abortion, gay rights, and whatnot, which we can get into if you want.
No.
But that's a consequence of direct democracy, even though Cuba is a one-party state as well.
Okay.
Like,
I mean, there's plenty of I know plenty of I'm not super familiar with the politics, so I don't even want to speak on it necessarily, just because I don't know a lot. I do know that a lot of Cubans that I've met fucking hate the Cuban government.
yeah, because they're in America.
They're not like rich. They're like
No, it doesn't matter. They're
okay, so they're
like, they don't have to be rich, but they're in America, which
No,
means
admittedly, I don't know.
like they had a
So if you're
disagreement
America,
in the
you have
lightest
to hate
terms.
America.
They either were forced to
Because America.
to run away,
What is
or
this
literally
place?
had, in the lightest terms, a disagreement with the Cuban government. So of course they are not going to be fond of
Okay.
the current Cuban
but
government.
Isn't there, when you're looking at a country like China, who's able to act so efficiently, and if you're looking for some democratization or like some equality of outcome in terms of income for the lowest
These guys.
people, seems like
Turn it into like plants and stuff.
a potential and
There's
almost like
zombies everywhere.
inevitable outcome is some of the stuff that you see in China, like one cultural identity, one religion or non-religion, like this
God, I
need to
care
be
with all my heart.
homogenous so
We
that
withdraw
people
your
are
wrath from
compliant
Yes.
and they live
Just
that
as
way.
you
This is state
develop
development
Now,
101.
same-
Every nation
But
state does
So the
some form
reason
of
the
this.
reason that has happened
Judgment
in
was
China is
unavoidable
why
because of
all
our
these
corruption.
mass human
Please
rights
at least spare
violations
my
are able
child
to
your wrath.
exist.
This
Like
baby has done no
re-educating
wrong.
people,
Please,
mass
my child,
detention
never
for people who are
Anyone who
religious.
finds this place,
You know what I mean?
please pray for us to know that there was desperate
Forced
sadness
labor camps.
here.
They fucking, and I know you deny that they are organ harvesting, but I do believe that they do that or did do that. Maybe they stopped.
Organ harvesting.
Yeah.
Organ harvesting did happen in China.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is like Falun Gong propaganda, which is that
No, I'm
like
not.
they have a. Oh, no, well, there's two different types. What we're talking about is like, yeah, were there criminal components and certainly
It was
people.
state-sponsored organ.
No, I don't
Yes, it
know.
was.
If it was state-sponsored organ
The evidence
harvesting,
suggests that
well,
it was.
the state actually. Watch out! She's right behind you. It's okay. If it was state-sponsored, the state would not have cracked down on it inevitably.
Well,
They did.
they realize how bad it looks. It was the evidence
Why
that
would
I've
they? But
seen
if
is
they're
that the state
authoritarian,
was
why would they
involved.
care about how bad it looks? You said that they
No,
have
they
labor
care.
camps.
China doesn't care about appearance.
Well,
They do to
But
it.
if they're
Of course they do.
authoritarian, why would they care? Well, I mean, they have labor camps,
Well,
you
they-
said, which is, by the way, ironic because America still has a much higher prisoner density than any other nation on the planet, and slavery is not abolished in America.
We can
The
criticize
13th
America
Amendment is
all we
slavery.
want, man.
Well, my point is, yes, it's wrong in China as well, but of course it's wrong in China as well.
Okay,
This
forget
is-
about that. I mean, like, what about, for example?
Now
the
you're
per-
doing whataboutism, by the way.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna tell you why.
Chinese knight
I'm
found a
specifically.
Chinese
Let's
tree in
use
the
this,
Rocky
and now this example because it's the best one. The Uyghur. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say their name. Detention camps where they re-educated and eliminated their cultural identity and
Yes.
religion. And also, frankly, it's almost impossible to do that and not like think of them as others, where they also,
They did.
are under horrible human
mass
rights.
surveillance, even including like certain representatives living with people and families. Like some of this is like people will say, oh, this is Adrian Zen's propaganda, and some of it is very real, 100%.
Don't
There
you
was
think
mass
it's Chinese
reification.
propaganda to be like it wasn't as bad?
I'm not saying it wasn't as bad.
Okay, good, 'cause I thought
but,
maybe
but,
you said
but
that
hold
was.
on. No, I think that my analysis on the matter is fairly nuanced, but still incredibly critical of the Chinese state. I have never said that mass surveillance, mass imprisonment, even execution in certain instances,
This is
and
the
China's
outcome.
development,
This is the outcome
and China,
of their homogenous socialist society.
the reason that the Chinese nation state claims they did this, and Xi Jinping famously even, I forget when he said this was a while back, but basically said something along the lines of like, we learned how to deal with Islamic terror from the American nation state.
Okay.
And that is why we had to deal with the Uyghurs. I don't agree with what they did. I think that it's fucking
Do
bullshit.
you think it's necessary to maintain their socialist homogeny?
It's not a socialist homogeny. Now we're talking about cultural homogeny, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, but it's all. Yeah,
'Cause
but it's connected. in my mind.
The separatist movement within Xinjiang and some of the aspects of that did include, knife attacks and the like. They don't have a lot of guns in China, luckily.
Mm-hmm.
The criminal component of that should have been dealt with on an individual basis rather than dragnets and collective punishment for the entirety of Xinjiang, which is what China did, and re-education camps and mass surveillance, which exists still to this day. Xinjiang, or any kind of separatist movement in Xinjiang, has now been absolutely squashed, destroyed, eviscerated, and not only have they done that, but also on top of that, they've basically softened, like you said, or I guess the term that Westerners will use is Hanified Xinjiang, and have now used their their cultural output as like an export even. Like you could just go to Xinjiang and see how wonderful everything is, that kind of thing. You found it. God damn, that's so funny. Mr. Xi urged the party to emulate aspects of America's war on terror after the September 11th attacks from documents leaked in 2019.
Just to frame this for people that aren't familiar with the history, the crackdowns over there were a result of a rise in terrorism in that region. There were bombings and stuff going on, and so all those camps and the re-education, all of that was a response. It was essentially a crackdown,
it was a completely, for the record, completely unjustifiable,
that's
way
what
over the
Israel's
top,
about
fucking
Palestine.
dragnet. Yes,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or what the United States did in Afghanistan after September 11th. I mean, we rocked that country for 20 years as a result of a terrorist
I'm
attack.
defending America or something.
That's really
Weird.
funny you should say that, because that is the automatic position of people in the West, though, is that like whenever I make a comparison to America, like if I compare Russia to America, people think I'm doing that to defend Russia. And it's like, no, that is the worst comparison I can make for a country's actions, because my opinion on American, the American superpower is that it is incredibly bloody and incredibly unjust. But the reason why people immediately go and say, what the fuck, why are you bringing up America in this situation, is because they inherently, without recognizing it, will defend American foreign policy because they are under the understanding.
I agree. Most people would do that.
Yeah.
But so my ultimate question is: do you believe that this cultural homogeny is required in a socialist or communist society?
Yes, I think that some form of positive social cohesion needs to occur if you are going to build a nation state. And this happens in public education. I think that public education is very valuable, and I'm 100% in agreement. If it's being done in a more positive way through public education, then it's great.
Right, but
If
not
they're doing,
like
a
erasing
negative-
their ethnic identity.
Yeah, if they're doing it in a negative way in that situation where like education
What's a positive
moves
way?
to
Example.
re-education, a positive component would be something that we unfortunately do not have in America either, would be to have regions that still have their own ethnic identities preserved through their own board of education and are allowed to exist. This is a major problem with the USSR as well. This happened in the USSR where there was a Russification of all the nation states that were under the banner of the USSR,
Yeah.
which ended up creating a fuck ton of division, and also
Probably like the pollution of somehow
like
is
suppression of religious
causing
freedom.
gentrification.
Religion is something that is so personal and so important
But
for
isn't
human beings
Marx's
and their
theory,
identity.
Isn't Marx's theory around like we have to get rid of a religion? That's
No,
central
I mean
to communism?
no, and also
Is
I
it
don't even
not?
care what Marx's own personal perspective on religion is ultimately, because I'm looking at real implementations of socialism throughout historical materialist socialist nation states.
you don't
and I'm
believe
saying
it's
that that's
required?
bad and wrong. It is demonstrably bad. It was bad in Afghanistan. It was bad in the USSR, and it's certainly bad when China does the same exact shit.
So you're saying yes, it's required, but nothing different than what you see in countries today that's considered
Yes.
good. By
Yes,
most people.
allowing people to have
A national
their own,
identity.
allowing people to have a national identity while simultaneously reinforcing their ethnic differences or their diversity of culture is absolutely a necessity for
Fair.
nation
Like it.
state development if you want this nation state to succeed. And
Okay, I
I'm
got
giving an example of why it didn't work in
I got you.
in the USSR.
By the way, I would urge you to look more into the organ harvesting thing because I do believe that did happen by the state. They were harvesting the Muslims' organs, man. Like the wait time on the.
But you're saying in modern China?
No, not in modern China. I don't think. Well, it was modern China. It wasn't that long ago, but I don't think they're doing it.
You're
now.
saying the state was harvesting the organs of Muslims.
Yeah, who were in that detention camps to give to their citizens. The wait time for organ here. Listen to this. One of the most cited pieces of evidence is the rapid growth of China's organ transplant industry in the early 2000s, with much shorter waiting time for organs than other countries. Chinese government has attributed this to the use of organs from executed prisoners, but the critics argue that those numbers do not match up. The prisoners of conscience,
Also,
that
these
sounds-
crackdowns literally
What?
can't.
I'm sorry, if it was in the early 2000s, it would have been before the crackdown on the Uyghurs.
I don't know when did.
So
that
it
happen?
sounds like it was just the
That's
general
what I was
prison
trying to say.
population.
There was a
not-
criminal component. I'm not saying that
Hold on,
organ
hold on. When
harvesting
did
did
that
not
happen, the
happen.
detention?
Organ harvesting certainly happened. There was a black market for organs, 100%, not just for Chinese citizens, mind you. That is like literally massaging the narrative to fit the Uyghurs being harvested for organs.
I like how you
because it.
disrespect
Well, that's
Oh.
Uyghur is how you're.
They're
you know what's funny
Turkish,
about
so
this?
yeah.
They're fucking Turkic.
Yeah.
Like, it's called East Turkestan. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not like the other side of my family. My mother's side is literally their last name is Uyghur. So this is not like random individuals that I have no affinity towards. That I'm saying like the Chinese nation state should oppressively fucking crush
I'm just
them.
saying.
It's
that
so
you
it's
should-
always additionally funny when some fucking dumb fuck from Iowa is trying to tell me about fucking Muslim oppression. Why don't you care about Muslim oppression in Xinjiang? It's like, what the fuck are you saying? Anyway, sorry, I get very heated about this because like people are so merciless. Just like people are merciless with you when they say you're a fucking tyrant or you're a capitalist pig dog or whatever the fuck. People are infinitely more merciless when you deviate from the foreign policy norms that have been mandated by Americans through our mainstream media.
Okay, so in short, I think I got my answer on that, which is, the China Tribunal. Okay, whatever. I want to move on to Taiwan. So last time,
I just want to point out it's 1 o'clock. We're pretty far over already.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's fine. We can.
Okay,
I think this is
just
very
keeping you
valuable
aware
and
of the-
very
Okay,
good.
good.
So I'm perfectly fine talking about this.
Okay, great. Love that. So last time we were talking about Taiwan, you had mentioned one country, two systems. What did you mean by that? Because I didn't know anything about that when you said it, but I've read
So-
it.
So close.
So since the Nixon era of normalizing relations with China, America's understanding of China has been that it is one over-encompassing nation, and that Taiwan, which certainly does want an independence movement or has a robust independence movement, is simply Chinese Taipei. The American understanding and the global understanding is the same, that there is a different autonomous organization inside of Taiwan, an autonomous government inside of Taiwan, but it's still under the Chinese umbrella. My opinion on the matter does not deviate away from the American foreign policy on the matter. And the reason for that is because it also does not deviate away from the collective Taiwanese understanding on the matter, which is that if there's two different forces here at play. Taiwan independence is not something that even Anthony Blinken or the American state backs. Why? Because it would be incredibly disruptive to
Let's talk about what the
our
people of
largest
Taiwan want.
trade partner. Great. The people of Taiwan want independence
Yeah.
in the future, possibly in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why they take that position, well, if you were to ask them without any sort of Chinese influence, like without any sort of like mainland China influence, would you want independence tomorrow? They would say, yes, that is the majority opinion.
Well, what they say is that we already have the independence.
They say we already...
China has no influence over Taiwanese economy or government. And
Yes,
they don't
and
touch it.
yet from a global perspective, they are still considered to be Chinese Taipei.
Right, because people doesn't want to rock the boat.
Exactly.
But the Taiwanese
And that is
people
my perspective
believe
as well.
that we are already independent. So, but
Okay.
you believe that this is China's statement, one country, two
So
systems.
then there's no additional need for state intervention from Western forces then.
Well, but China is
China is what?
it is
Oppressive?
being provocative
What are they doing?
towards the Taiwanese.
What are they doing that you would consider to be provocative towards the Taiwanese?
I mean, they have military stationed around. They're doing war games and shit like that.
You know where Taiwan is in proximity to mainland China, right? It's 1 mile off their coastline.
Okay,
So whenever people
well,
say China
Pretty
is
obvious though.
China is violating their
Listen,
airspace,
we know China says it. The government even says it that we're gonna fucking take Taiwan if y'all don't play ball.
yes,
So we don't need to
because-
pretend like they're
because
not doing it.
China, no matter if I agree with this or not, right? Because I want autonomy for the people of Taiwan. I want them to do whatever the fuck they want, self-governance, right? So I understand that, and I also simultaneously understand one, the history of the Taiwanese nation state being propped up, and why it was propped up, and more importantly than that, I understand that the Chinese government, which is a different government than ours, right? They are human beings over there that have their own concerns, is not going to want a fucking American military base 1 mile off of their coastline. That is a perfectly reasonable thing to never want. And given the historical reasons as to how Taiwan has been created as a separate nation state with its own expansionist interest in the Republic of China, the entire mainland China, including Mongolia, that's like its founding mandate, that it is understandable for China to not want that to happen, which is why they constantly counter American saber rattling with their own version of saber rattling. This does not mean that the Chinese state is nice. This does not mean that the Chinese state is genuine or wants to
30
implement
troops are
communism in
stationed in
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
What?
30 U.S. troops are stationed in
There's
Taiwan.
no way you think that is
mean,
the
I don't
only
know what-
material
I don't know
support
what
that
you
America
read.
is offering Taiwan.
30 U.S.
Taiwan's
troops.
entire standing army would not exist without U.S. support since its inception.
Okay, but America.
Taiwan's
You say America has a military base there as one of the, and
no,
that would be a
no,
good
no,
reason,
no.
But I don't.
No,
they
I'm
don't
saying
have
I don't want
military
it to turn. I do not want
called being
further
factually
conflict.
wrong.
The people of Taiwan do not want further conflict, which is why the overarching assessment is like, we're independent, we want to maintain independence, we want to be fully independent, but we don't want to rock the boat.
But it seems like if China was to just invade Taiwan and like, look, we're over
It would be
shit.
devastating. It would be awful for Taiwan. It would be awful for China. It would be horrifyingly bad.
Mm-hmm.
It would be disastrous. We are in agreement right there, right?
Yeah, of
like,
course.
okay, so we both want
Be horrible,
no
yeah,
further
nightmare.
bloodshed to happen, and that's what the people of Taiwan also
But in a
say they
sense,
want as
You
well.
also kind of see where China's coming from.
I absolutely understand why China would feel like this is a major issue with their national security concerns. The example I would give you is this.
Wow.
Let's say, just like England and France tried to do during the Civil War because they had material interest in the cotton trade continuing with chattel slavery, let's say they offered material support to the southern states that wanted to secede, right, in order to continue slavery. Okay? And they were actually successful to a certain degree because third parties like Imperial Japan were also invading mainland America, okay, in this process. So the Civil War ended in a way where chattel slavery continued in the South, and every abolitionist was executed, and they called it, instead of white terror, let's say they called it black terror, okay? They executed mercilessly and ruthlessly any abolitionist that lived in the South, And then, after years and years of this fascist, white supremacist implementation, hyper-nationalist implementation, the southern states that had successfully seceded, okay, kept building a robust military apparatus through surplus military supplies
You're comparing-
and weapon systems that other countries that were foreign adversaries to the United States of America started giving them even more and more of this, and then and also said the real America is the South America. Southern states are the real America, and they will one day take over the rest of America.
You're saying-
and that they will inevitably take over the rest of America, and that's going to be the real America. We're going to help them do that. And then
You're saying Taiwan is comparable to the South seceding.
Taiwan in its inception is identical to the South.
How long after the South seceded did the war begin?
What do you mean?
How long between the South seceding and the Civil War happening?
I mean, there was
I don't think it
a
was very long.
period. There was a
Month?
period of time. No. There was a period of time leading up to that where there were abolitionist movements that happened. That's why people say that John Brown's execution.
But Taiwan was independent
like a
lot
pivotal
longer.
point.
I mean, they've been separate for a long time now.
Yeah, no,
Like
I understand.
1950s.
Which is why I'm saying, imagine if the South was able to successfully secede,
Yeah.
right? And
America wanted to
almost
take it back. Northern America wanted to.
No,
take it
Northern America is we're worried about our own shit. We can't fucking deal with South America right now, right? Like Northern America, the Federation, let's say, okay, is now working on improving their own productive forces, doing trade deals and whatnot with the rest of the world, and they start rapidly urbanizing, rapidly developing, okay? And, the New Deal only happens there or whatever the fuck. Meanwhile, the southern states are entirely propped up by a foreign adversary, okay, that is infinitely more powerful than Northern America. And they keep saying, we're going to take over the entirety of America. It's one America, okay? And
Okay, so I think
because the northern states are able to improve their conditions, have favorable trade deals with the rest of the planet, they inevitably get to a point where they want to maintain their hegemony, they want to maintain their security, their national security. Do you think it would be appropriate? To rock the boat per se and allow the South to continue developing and continue having a massive military? And inevitably, you send envoys like Nancy Pelosi to Southern American states to fucking say, hey, look, they're democratic now. Sure, they were designed around slavery, but they have a democracy now, and I think that it's okay and appropriate to fucking keep building their military, make it as robust as possible.
The South was seceded just because we were talking about it. It was 3 months between the war and the.
But leading up, the build up to that was significantly longer.
Yeah. Okay, so I understand your position on Taiwan. I get all that. I don't. The one country, two system thing is silly though, because.
But living in California, you personally understand it, right? Living in a blue state, you understand why that would be genuinely you would understand how blue states in America would have security concerns if southern states had seceded successfully and kept saying no, the rest of America is ours.
Mm-hmm.
After they fucking lost too.
Well, I mean, this was 70 years ago that Taiwan.
Taiwan now is not a fucking fascist nationalist military state.
I don't think that how it was founded matters at all.
70 years is not significant in development. That's
my point.
No, it's. What do you mean?
I don't think that you should be oh yeah, Taiwan was a bunch of losers that went and started their own country, and so they're not entitled to a national identity. I don't think that matters.
70 years is a blip in time in as far as talking about a fucking empire or a history that spans over
I don't care, but that doesn't matter, right? We're talking about human beings.
Yeah, and now they are democratic, which is great, and I understand their want in autonomy and not being under some form of crushing civil liberties that the Chinese state will bring.
The one country, two systems isn't real. That's not a real thing.
What do you mean?
It's not a real thing. It's one country, one system. Like at Hong Kong, that's what they want to do. They say Taiwan, we'll do the one country, two systems, but that's propaganda.
No, but that's the American policy, which they did with China. They have America said that they would not support an independent Taiwan, and that Taiwan is a part of China. But internally, Taiwan still has autonomy, which is what is currently happening. And the Chinese state sees it as a autonomous region that is still under the Chinese banner that ends up getting military support from, Western forces.
Let's talk about Ukraine, and then that's my final one.
Okay.
So we were talking about Ukraine, and your position was that the support for Ukraine is 100% manufactured.
No.
That's what you said last time.
No, I think that all
I should've watched
all
it longer.
matter of American foreign policy is greatly influenced by manufactured consent because of our interest in, doing whatever the fuck we want to do there. Whether it be like bringing Ukraine into the Western sphere of influence, or it's not genuine because they want like genuine emancipation for Ukrainians.
So last time you guys compared it, you said, well, nobody gives a fuck about Georgia when that got invaded. Therefore, the fact that anyone cares about Ukraine feels like manufactured.
It's not even just Georgia.
Well, you guys know that, but you guys realize there's like a massive. I didn't know anything about the Georgian War. I learned about it. There's a huge difference. You guys understand?
well,
that.
I mean, the scale is.
It was a 5-day war.
Yeah, it was 5
They
days
expected Ukraine to
versus-
drop in 5 days, and if it did, we probably wouldn't be talking about it. Because
That's true. That's true.
so like what happened was Ukraine mounted this miraculous defense, and they've got Russia, a fascist country, on the back foot. And we all like when fascism.
I don't
takes the L.
think Russia is on the back foot. I think it's just like extending the harm
Well,
and only furthering
we
conflict.
inflicted so much, and I stand with the Ukrainian people because I think Ukraine is a force for good in the world. They're on.
Can I
think
just
Russia's a
stop you
force
for a
for
second?
bad.
Because you said 100% manufacturer consent. Like
That's what
nothing
you
is,
said.
Nothing is genuine. I said 100% manufacturing consent is a leading role in this.
If you wanna amend
and the
it,
reason
that's-
why
that's
no
fine.
the reason why I take issue with this is because it's like stating like I don't give a fuck about Ukraine. Of course I give a fuck about people in Ukraine. I want the war and the bloodshed, the unnecessary bloodshed to end. Okay. My assessment on the situation might deviate from, NATO, like bloodthirsty NATO defenders or whatever the fuck.
You feel like we shouldn't even be doing anything in Ukraine?
No, I don't.
Nothing.
No, I don't. I think
You
that
don't think so? You
no,
think
I think that of course there's a necessary intervention that must happen. I'm not
okay.
saying that at all. I mean, I fucking raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for Ukrainian refugees. Like, I'm sorry, this is such a silly fucking thing that, like, not from you, but I hear so much from dipshits online
Well,
who
let's
just want to
get to-
fucking
well,
cut
this is good,
propaganda.
so you can say exactly
suck my
what you mean.
dick. You know?
So you do
Fuck.
believe that America's actions in Ukraine are the right ones?
I think that America's actions to a certain degree in Ukraine is understandable. It's reasonable, certainly what the Ukrainian people want, but I think America's interest in Ukraine is not genuine. It's not genuine emancipation. It's more so a continuation of the bloodshed,
Well,
which
who
is
cares
demonstrated
in
not
Spain,
by me, but by American politicians like Chris Murphy, who have openly said on the record that for 5% of our military budget, we've been able to cripple a foreign adversary's military budget without a single American service member dying in the process. I would say that is profoundly successful. What are we doing in Ukraine? We're sending our refurbished old weapons and weapon systems to Ukraine. We have to replenish those weapon systems. It's a never-ending cycle.
Okay, because the reason I ask is because there seems to be a somewhat of a sentiment in the leftist circles or social. I don't know how to even describe it now. I don't know, but that the proxy war people say in Ukraine is unjustified.
It is a proxy war.
No, I know, but they're saying we shouldn't be supporting Ukraine and the whole thing.
Yeah, I
Russia
can't.
should just take Ukraine. And
No,
that should be
I
that.
can't speak for other. I can't speak for other leftists. I don't know what the fuck they say, but plenty of those people also despise me and say that I'm like not pushing Z
I heard-
or
yeah.
whatever. So it doesn't fucking
I
matter.
thought I heard Richard Wolff have some kind of thing like that.
I can't speak on Richard Wolff either. There's disagreements that I have with Richard Wolff. He had
Okay,
like.
so you're down with what's happening. You're
No,
down with what's
I'm not
happening.
down with what's happening in Ukraine because I want the bloodshed to end, and the only way to do that is by bringing China to the table, bringing America to the table. The
You think
the real
Ukraine
actors
should,
here.
You think Ukraine should
have-
make some secessions to Russia?
I think the original 6-point plan that was a continuation of the Minsk Accords that were tried twice and failed twice would be a far preferable situation than like endless bloodshed over, you know, inches of territory where, you know, people are being fucking slaughtered
I don't
endlessly.
think the Ukrainians would describe it as inches of territory.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, you're saying they're fighting over inches of territory. I don't.
He's just saying in the context of how stagnated the war has become, like the back and forth is pretty
Yeah.
much ground to a halt at this point, and it's
This
just,
is what I
it's
mean. It's like a
bloodbath.
very cynical interpretation of what I'm trying to say. It is inches of territory physically when we speak about it.
But I guess I think Ukrainian people get angry when they hear you talk about it because they. Feel like,
That's understandable. I mean,
'cause they
I get
feel
it.
like you're.
They want full-throated
coming from the
support.
Russian
They want and
market
expect
more.
full-throated support, right?
They understandably want that, and they want more than that. They also wanted Article 5. They wanted full NATO protections and NATO nations.
They don't like that you say that they should secede territory to a fascist invader.
It's not even secession of territory. It's like prior agreements that neither party has held on to. The real Ukrainian criticism in this situation comes from people who say, well, Hassan, how can you say that when Russia has not held on to their obligations? And that is true. Russia has not held on to their side of the bargain on the Minsk Accords, but neither has Ukraine. And my point is, ensuring that with international
I don't know
cooperation
anything
is
about that accord. What is that?
the Minsk Accords were, so this again goes deep into fucking history, and you can't always say like, oh, I don't know the history, so I don't know, and then repeat like mainstream media propaganda, you know?
Well, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know anything about it.
Ukraine as a nation state has even predated, or some form of like Ukraine has predated even the Russian nation state or the Russian Empire, I guess. And its nation state development project has always hinged on excising Russian influence. However, under the USSR, Ukraine, which was called the Ukraine originally, which just means like the border, okay, was seen as, had plenty of Russian sympathetic people that lived in the eastern regions. And that sympathy only grew the further east you went, the closer you got to current existing Russian territory. Now that is no longer the case. Make no mistake, I'm not saying that at all. And that is no longer the case almost entirely due to Russia's actions in that area. Like blowing the shit out of Kharkiv is going to make sure, is the fastest way to make sure that there is no sympathies for your government whatsoever ever again for the rest of your life. So that's all gone away. But originally the contention was LPR and DPR, through Russian influence, and this is the Ukrainian assessment of the situation, these two areas wanted autonomy and were getting backed by the Russian government, and Western involvement that wanted to keep Ukraine in the sphere of the West did not want to give the actual protective assurances to Ukraine, but wanted to play the delicate balance of like saying, you know what, yeah, maybe we'll get you into NATO, with no real interest in getting them into NATO, maybe we'll get you into the EU,
So how did
with no interest in
Ukraine
getting them
violate
into
their
the EU. What?
How did Ukraine violate their agreement?
There was mass shelling on both sides, like back
Are
and
you talking
forth
about the current
shelling.
war?
No, back and forth shelling that has been happening since 2004.
Okay. So it was a non-aggressive
with 13 or
agreement?
14,000 people dying.
Okay, so I don't know anything
in
about that
totality.
either.
So that is. So at the time there was a agreement called the Minsk Agreements. There were two versions of this, which neither side agreed upon, which meant that LPR and DPR would still remain under Ukraine, but would have autonomy. Okay. And Ukraine understandably did not want this because that would mean that Russia would have an outsized control on Ukrainian affairs and Ukraine politics, which it already did through Russian loyalist leadership that they had. That was obviously squashed because there's always been this back and forth between Western influence in Ukraine, wanting to move them into the Western sphere of influence, and Eastern influence, Russian influence in Ukraine, which wanted to maintain Ukraine's status and wanted to change Ukrainian affairs.
Okay, so they were both attacking each other, and you think the attacks were equally provocative? And again, I don't know anything about it.
I think that this was another instance of proxy war, 100%.
Okay.
Like there are people who wanted to be a part of Russia, and at the end of the day, though, like the reaction from the Ukrainian government to that was understandable. They wanted to protect their own interests. They wanted to protect their own borders. They wanted to protect their hegemony and national security interests. But there's a difference between like what they did in Crimea, for example, and what they did with LPR and DPR. What did they do in Crimea? There was a referendum. People say it was bullshit referendum. It was under gunpoint, which is understandable to say that because that is what happened in Crimea. But Russian territorial claims to Crimea Russian territorial claims that Crimea had more historical prescience and the highest level of support for Russian expansionist policies in Crimea specifically because of its military base that the Russian military operated out of. Okay, and what did Ukraine do in that situation? They cut the water supply. They immediately fucking broke a dam, a USSR era dam that was offering supply like water for the Crimean citizens that they said they, cared about.
You're talking about that recently? That happened?
No, that dam has been destroyed when Russia invaded Ukraine.
But essentially, I wanted to clarify.
Like they cut Crimea off, and not in the same way that they wanted to deal with LPR and DPR.
I wanted to clarify your position.
Yes.
Because it seems like there's a lot of confusion, so it's good to clarify. You do support.
This will not clarify my position. In the eyes of people
Why?
who want to say that
You
I'm
say
like
you
anti-Ukraine,
believe
people
it.
are still going to fucking yell at me.
But you said that you believe what America's doing in Ukraine is right.
I believe that Ukraine has a right to emancipation. What America should do in Ukraine is offer security commitments and assurances, and you can only get that by arriving at a table where you don't fucking destroy the bargaining chips, and instead allow the original security commitments to continue. I
don't know what you mean by that. You mean
So
at the table
Ukrainian
with Russia?
envoys and Russian envoys got together in Antalya and put a 15-point security plan together as they were negotiating the terms of a
You're saying
ceasefire
Ukraine
agreement.
And Russia, we need to get them, and I mean that. It's not that easy, I would assume.
Well, there was moves that were being made to arrive at that.
Seems like Putin, as
like a year
he's
ago.
kind of like a fascist leader, is
Yes, Putin's interests are
take the whole thing.
Putin's interests certainly are nationalistic. There's obviously material benefits to Ukraine because Ukraine would be a competitor to Russia as far as
you
like
think
oil and
the
gas.
Ukrainians
But
should go to the table and make concessions to the Russians?
I think that Ukrainians went to the table and made concessions to the Russians originally, and it was actually a very clever move by Zelensky to, like, for example, push the Crimean referendum 15 years down the line in order to not deliberate on that aspect right now, because Ukrainians want Crimea back as well. They want LPR and DPR to be Ukrainian. And Zelensky knew that was going to be an impossible thing to deal with, because he's right now, on the one hand, you have Ukrainians with interest in emancipation, ridding the Russian scourge from their borders, and taking back all of their territory from Russia, which includes Crimea as well. So he has a delicate balance where he has to make sure that those guys are not pissed off and overthrow him, and then or that America somehow gets involved and overthrows him, while simultaneously ending the war.
I'm assuming where people get mad at you is just the suggestion that Ukraine should make concessions to an aggressive fascist invader. Because, as we know, European fascist invaders, people often wonder,
they don't stop.
If we didn't make concessions to Hitler, would the war have happened? People wonder that.
Yeah, there's a difference of there's a difference of talking pre-World War II and post-World War II, because we do have mutually assured nuclear destruction.
I was about to say, unfortunately, the nukes change all the calculus with that.
So that's the difference there, and that's a very significant one, because Article 5 dictates that any kind of NATO nation that Russia tries to attack, okay, because NATO was developed against Russia, USSR, communism, it was an anti-communist institution in of itself.
What's going on?
Immediately means that all other nations, according to Article 5, are drawn into war with a nuclear superpower like Russia.
Right.
So there's a difference. Plus, one other aspect of this is that Russia kind of showed its ass and its capabilities, and where those capabilities end as far as ground war goes, which is the reason why you see Finland and Sweden, which previously had long-held neutrality, not direct agreements, but long-held neutrality I wouldn't say treaties because it's not an official treaty, but just like didn't join NATO.
An understanding.
Immediately joined NATO. Why? Because they realized they don't have any fucking power. What are they going to do? Go to Finland? Get the fuck out of here. They can't take over Ukraine. They said it was going to be a day. They suck. They don't have the power.
So also, I don't know the exact name of it, but I know Ukraine surrendered their nuclear weapons, which is one of the best things you can hope.
Worst things you could do. Never give up the nukes.
But like in terms of like a humanistic, a political move, it's bad. But like as a humanistic thing, that's
Yeah, I mean, obviously we
right?
should get rid of nukes. Yeah.
Some say Ukraine had no way of utilizing those nukes because like the control mechanism was in the USSR, so in Moscow. But but you still shouldn't have given your nuclear stockpile.
So your point is that they should never have done that.
No. I think we'd
Don't
be
you
looking
think-
at a very different world if, for Ukrainians at least, if we didn't.
With the benefit of hindsight, how could you say that? I mean, I don't think they would get invaded right now if they had nukes, right? I mean,
well,
if you have nukes, you don't get invaded. That's just kind of how it works.
Anyway, we made a guarantee to them that you give up your nukes and we'll got your back. And so I do feel like that's a pretty important agreement to uphold. I mean,
what?
You're talking about American promises to Ukraine in exchange for
surrendering their nukes.
Yeah, America never actually followed through on any of their promises. America's still not following technically their promises of defending Ukraine. They're just giving Ukrainians weapons. Ukraine is currently sitting in a very unique position that I see happen in the same cycle of violence in the Middle East all the fucking time. America goes to a militant group and says, hey, we're going to give you weapons, you want autonomy, specifically Kurds, right?
You think every country should have a nuclear bomb?
I think every country
citizen should
in
have
this
one.
current...
Every citizen of America?
Yeah.
That's Tim Pool's,
I think
that's
in the
Tim
current
Pool's position.
formation, if you have a nation state, you have to have a fucking nuke. Otherwise, America will come and fuck you up.
So you think every nation should have a nuclear
I think
program?
either every nation has a nuke or none of them have it. And I would obviously want none of the nations to have it.
But less is
which is why I
better.
was in support of the Iranian denuclearization agreement. I thought that was good, which, Donald Trump fucked up.
Oops.
I believe an individual citizen in this country has a right to own.
Do you believe
a
every
nuclear
person should have a nuclear bomb? That's
Yes.
the socialist vision
Yes,
of
I think everyone
America.
should have a nuclear bomb.
I mean, that's the only equality that we can really... Everyone should have a nuclear silo in their garage.
Memorandum specifically.
So, okay, in short, you support Ukraine. What
Budapest
the
Memorandum.
Allied powers are doing to support them is right.
No, because America's interest in Ukraine is not one that is genuine. America's interest in Ukraine is just
I don't
fucking
care about
withering.
the interest. I don't
No, but that's
care about
important
America's interest.
because-
I'm asking what you think.
Because no, America's interest in Ukraine is
It's got
incredibly
nothing-
important.
What do you think is the right thing to do in Ukraine?
I told you what I think the right thing to do.
then I
is.
asked to clarify,
Instead of
and you said
fucking up
no.
the deal, instead of fucking up the deal that Ukraine had with Russia by Boris Johnson fucking showing up in the middle of that, going to Kyiv directly.
Dude, do
and
you think what's happening there is right? If not, why?
Do I think what's
The
happening?
Allied
You ask me a
powers.
question, I answer it, and then you move on to something
No,
different.
because I asked you.
I'm telling you what I
do
want.
the Allied
Ukraine
powers
threat or
is
use
what
of
they're
force
doing there
against
right. You said
territorial
no, but I just got
integrity
done
and
having this whole
political
conversation where you said
independence
yes.
I think what the Allied powers are doing, as far as
as
as giving weapons to Ukraine with no end in sight, because they see it as a great way to fucking, great way to continue the harm done to a weak Russia that they can simultaneously claim is really fucking powerful, is only going to continue this war rather than try to fucking implement security commitments and get to a unilateral agreement or a bilateral agreement where and not just fucking Russia and Ukraine, but bring China to the table and put an end, do a ceasefire and put an end to this war is infinitely better for Ukraine, in Ukrainian development, Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian citizens not fucking dying senselessly under a artillery shelling campaign that's literally happening. You know what's really fucking insane about this? Russia is getting artillery shells from North Korea, and America is America's telling South Korea to give artillery shells to Ukraine. It's fucking nuts. Both sides are just fucking shelling each other.
Shells.
But it's so stupid.
Who's gonna
Ukraine
make
is
the
now
shells?
also using depleted uranium as well on its own fucking soil.
Okay, so
that is
your
going to have
your
damaging
position
implications.
Is that
That's
the
gonna have
Allies
damaging-
helping Ukraine is good, but that Ukraine needs to be more willing to make concessions to
Not just
Russia.
Ukraine. Allies need to be more willing to some in certain instances even push Ukraine to make understandable concessions with because
Like
the
giving up
idea,
land.
what?
Like giving up
European-
land.
Not giving
That-
up
like the-
land. No, it's not
Oh.
giving up land. But
That's what-
pushing a
that's what Clinton
referendum
was.
15 years into the future for Crimea is a really solid middle of the ground approach
The-
that Zelensky's own team actually put forward, which I thought was great.
Do you think Zelensky's a provocateur?
No. What?
Oh shit! I have a doctor's appointment.
What the fuck? Wait,
Oh, I'm just asking because that's a position. I'm not saying that you ever said that. What?
you said it like I've said it.
No. I was just getting your opinion on it. Just because I've heard people say that, and I
Double-sided
was just checking your opinion on it.
No, I
What
think
time is it at, Lena?
it's at 2.
That's my last part, though. Basically,
No, I don't think Zelensky is a provocateur. What?
like a bad faith actor.
No, I think Zelensky is certainly a self-interested politician who definitely wants emancipation.
Self-interest,
for-
literally. Yeah, meaning his. Well, anyway.
Yeah, no,
I-
he wants Russia to no longer have control over Ukrainian territories, which is perfectly reasonable. He also has to strike a delicate balance because, as I correctly pointed out when the invasion first happened, whenever an irredentist or imperialist power makes a move on another nation, you embolden some of the most reactionary forces, and they are seen as liberators because in that moment they are the liberators. The ones who have the violent means to push back are going to be seen as protectors. That only grows nationalistic, hyper-nationalistic sentiment, and that is never productive. That is never good. That's not good for workers' rights. That's not good for future prospects of Ukraine. And I think that blowback, who knows what's going to happen, but is terrifying.
I have to leave, bro.
All right.
But it's 1:30.
Bro.
I thank you for going so long. How long have we been going?
No, you know who needs to leave?
3 hours.
Vladimir Putin
I agree.
needs to leave.
He
That's
needs to leave
brave.
those people alone. Hey, Putin,
I'm gonna
leave
say
those people
and
alone.
I know that's controversial, but he's gotta leave.
This is probably our longest episode, and we did it not even mentioning a single current event.
We did mention that Rupert Murdoch died. That turned out to be
He's
misinformation
not
that we were
dead.
spreading, but
No, I said, is he dead? And you
Oh,
said
okay.
no.
he's not dead
Not yet.
yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
He's getting up there, 90 something.
I think this was a good conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
Was that good? Do you feel like I'm a fucking anti-America charlatan
No.
whose bad faith
No,
who just doesn't?
no. I think your foreign policies, after talking them out, they're all like completely defensible and good positions. On the point of socialism, I can say like, well, I have a deeper understanding of it now. I do still believe that it seems more mystical and
No, you want Marx.
wishful.
You want Marxist, Leninist, Kleinist thought, which is
but
socialism with
ultimately-
capitalist characteristics.
Yes, and ultimately that is what I want. And ultimately, we agree almost entirely. And if you're mad about that, you're dumb.
Yeah.
You're
All right.
a dumb idiot.
I have to pee really
Freaking
bad.
got him,
now.
If
dude.
you're watching this and you're angry, you're a stupid. dumb
Freaking got him, man.
Dumbass.
idiot. No, I thought that was good. I thought that was good.
I think so too.
Unless you're Ukrainian, then they have a right at least.
yeah,
They're
no,
there.
for sure. I
Or
understand.
Taiwanese, or Tibetan.
I understand.
They have a right to be angry. I'm just saying.
I get
If
it.
you're an armchair
Suck
warrior,
my
who's,
tongue.
like,
We're
from
gonna get
NorCal and graduated.
I
from
can't wait for
Berkeley.
I can't wait for so many people from Virginia, Langley, writing about how they've been living in Taiwan for 25 years.
Right, like those. No, I thought that was
I
a
do
good
not
faith
trust
conversation.
this
I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was good, and it was good for me to kind of explore
It's
what I
the
think.
it's the classic like Donald Trump, my people yearn for freedom. Please glass Iran take that you hear from people living on American soil.
Thank
Like
you.
the
Hassan.
only way to save Iran is by glassing it.
Thank you.
All right, I have to pee so bad.
That's what Ian said.
Ah.
Thanks, bro. See you next week. Bye, everybody. I got a pizza.
Well, that's funny. I think. What time 338. I'm gonna do some breaky stuff. Can I even exit here? Yeah, I can. Okay, we'll get stuff figured out and